When I arrived at the restaurant for my grandson's 5th birthday party, the hostess looked me up and down and said, "The party is at capacity. You are not on the list." I stood there, clutching a hand-carved wooden truck, watching my son-in-law inside, drinking champagne that I had paid for. That was the moment it hit me. To them, I was just an old wallet that had finally run dry. So I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I walked back to my truck, made one phone call, and canceled every single payment. 15 minutes later, the music inside stopped and the real party began. I am Russell Hayes, 68 years old, and for the last 40 years, I have moved half of America's freight across the interstate highway system. I built a logistics empire from a single second-hand rig and a roadmap, but if you looked at me today, you would never know it. I wear flannel shirts, not Italian suits. I drive a Ford, not a Ferrari. And I believe that respect to my daughter Jasmine and her husband Bryce, I am just a retired trucker living on a pension, a lonely old man who is useful only when bills need to be paid. I shifted into park and stepped out. The valet, a young kid with slicked back hair, wrinkled his nose as he approached. He looked at my truck like it was a contagious disease. He hesitated to even take the keys. I didn't let it bother me. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the gift I had spent the last month making. It was a toy semi-truck, carved from solid black walnut, with working wheels and a little cabin door that opened. I had sanded it until the wood felt like silk. My grandson, Leo, loves trucks. He is the only person in this family who looks at me and sees a hero, not an ATM. Today was his 5th birthday. I had transferred $7,000 to Bryce's account 3 weeks ago to cover this party. Bryce had told me it was for a intimate family gathering. I walked toward the entrance, smoothing down my jacket. It was clean, but it was old. I could feel the eyes of the other guests on me as they stepped out of their Teslas and Mercedes. They were the kind of people who think net worth is a personality trait. I ignored them. I just wanted to see Leo's face when he opened the truck. I reached the heavy oak doors and smiled at the hostess standing behind the podium. She was young, beautiful in a cold way, and she didn't smile back. "Name?" she asked, her finger hovering over her iPad. "Russell Hayes," I said. "I am here for the Sterling party, for Leo Sterling." She tapped the screen, scrolled down, and then scrolled back up. She did it slowly, theatrically. Then she looked at me with a practiced look of fake sympathy. "I am sorry, sir. I don't have a Russell Hayes on the guest list." I frowned. "That's a mistake. I am the grandfather. I paid for the party." She let out a short, sharp sigh, like I was wasting her valuable time. "Sir, this is a private event. Mr. Sterling was very specific about the guest list. It is strictly limited to close family and business associates. If you are not on the list, you cannot enter." I looked past her shoulder, through the glass panels of the double doors. The restaurant was bathed in golden light. I saw the balloons, silver and gold. I saw the waiters moving with trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres. And then I saw him, Bryce, my son-in-law. He was standing near the bar, holding a crystal flute of champagne, laughing with a group of men in sharp suits. He looked like he owned the world. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my truck. Beside him was my daughter, Jasmine. She looked nervous, clutching her purse, her eyes darting around the room. And sitting at a small table in the corner, looking bored and lonely, was Leo. He was staring at the door. He was waiting for me. I tapped on the glass. Bryce turned. His eyes met mine. For a second, I thought he would wave me in. I thought he would run over and tell the hostess there had been a mistake. But he didn't. His smile faded. He looked at me with pure annoyance. Then, he gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He turned his back on me and raised his glass to toast with his friends. The message was clear. I was not a mistake. I was an exclusion. I looked back at the hostess. "Ask him," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Ask Bryce Sterling." The hostess straightened her spine. "Sir, Mr. Sterling gave us strict instructions. No unlisted guests. Especially not," she paused, looking at my scuffed work boots, "not anyone who doesn't meet the dress code. Please leave, or I will have to call security." My grip tightened on the wooden truck. I could feel the sharp edge of the fender digging into my palm. I wanted to kick that door down. I wanted to march in there and grab Bryce by his expensive lapels and ask him why he felt comfortable taking my money, but not my presence. But then I looked at Leo again. If I caused a scene, Leo would see his grandfather getting dragged out by security guards. I would not ruin his memory of his birthday. I took a deep breath. The cold Chicago air filled my lungs. "Okay," I said. "I will leave." The hostess smirked. "Thank you for understanding." I turned around and walked back toward the valet stand. But I didn't get in my truck. I stood under the awning, out of the wind, and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. My heart was beating slow and hard, like a war drum. I didn't call Jasmine. She wouldn't answer, or if she did, she would just cry and beg me not to make Bryce mad. I was done making Bryce mad. I was about to make him destitute. I dialed a number that was saved in my contacts simply as the Vault. It wasn't a customer service line. It was a direct line to the private wealth management division of the bank, where I had parked the proceeds from the sale of my company. A woman answered on the first ring. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes. How can I help you?" I watched the restaurant through the window. I could see the waiters pouring another round of vintage wine. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm, "I need you to look at the supplementary platinum card ending in 4590, the one issued to Bryce Sterling." "One moment, sir." I waited. Inside, Bryce was clapping another man on the back, pointing to the open bar as if he were the king of generosity. "I have it, sir," Sarah said. "I see a pending charge of $7,000 for a deposit at LeBlanc Restaurant, and an open authorization for the bar tab currently running at $2,000. "Mark the deposit as fraudulent," I said. There was a pause on the line. Sarah was a professional, but even she was surprised. "Sir, if we mark it as fraud, the funds will be clawed back immediately. The merchant will receive a notification that the payment has been revoked. The card will be locked." "I know," I said. "Do it. And Sarah, block the merchant. Flag any future transaction from this location as suspicious activity. I want that card to be as useless as a piece of plastic scrap." "Done, Mr. Hayes. The charge has been reversed. The card is frozen. Is there anything else?" "No, that will be all." I hung up. I didn't leave. I wanted to watch. For 2 minutes, nothing happened. The party continued. The jazz band played a smooth, upbeat tune. Bryce was still smiling. And then, the manager appeared. He was a tall man with a thin mustache, holding a portable credit card terminal. He walked up to Bryce. He didn't look happy. I saw Bryce wave his hand dismissively and tap his card on the machine. He laughed, saying something to his friends, probably joking about a technical glitch. The manager shook his head. He held the machine up. Red light. Bryce frowned. He pulled the card out and swiped it. Red light. He rubbed the chip on his jacket and inserted it again. Red light. I stood outside in the cold, feeling a fire burning in my chest. I saw the color drain from Bryce's face. He patted his pockets, looking for another card. I knew he didn't have one. He had maxed out his personal limits months ago trying to keep up appearances. He was living on my credit. The manager signaled to a waiter. The waiter stopped pouring the wine. He actually took a bottle back from a guest's table. The jazz band faltered as someone whispered to the piano player. The music stopped. The room went silent. Bryce was arguing now. He was pointing at the manager, his face turning red. I could imagine what he was screaming. "Do you know who I am?" But the manager didn't care who he was. He cared about the bill. I saw Jasmine step forward, looking terrified. She opened her purse, but I knew she had nothing in there but lipstick and tissues. Bryce turned on her, his hands flying in the air. The guests started to whisper. The circle of admiration around Bryce broke apart as people took a step back, sensing the disaster. The hostess at the door looked back at the commotion, confused. She looked out the window and saw me. I was still standing there, holding the wooden truck. I raised my hand and gave her a small, polite wave. Inside, the lights in the main dining room dimmed abruptly. The manager was cutting his losses. The party was over. I turned to the valet. "Bring me my truck," I said. The kid ran to get it. He didn't look at me with disgust anymore. He looked at me with fear. He didn't know what I had done, but he knew I was the one who was still standing while the man inside was falling apart. As I drove away, I didn't feel happy. I felt a cold resolve. This was just the warning shot. Bryce thought he had embarrassed me by leaving me off a list. He had no idea that he had just declared war on the only man who was keeping him from drowning, and I was about to pull the plug on the whole ocean. The silence inside LeBlanc was heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster or a prison sentencing. I was not there to see it, but I knew exactly what was happening. I had orchestrated it. Inside that gilded cage of high society, the air conditioning seemed to stop working for exactly one person. Bryce Sterling stood by the mahogany bar, his hand trembling as he held out his platinum card for the third time. The restaurant manager, a man whose patience had evaporated the moment the transaction was flagged as fraudulent, stared at him with eyes as cold as the ice in the champagne buckets. "Try it again," Bryce demanded. His voice cracked. It was a high, thin sound that betrayed his desperation. "There is clearly a mistake with your system. That card has a limit higher than your annual salary." The manager did not blink. He did not smile. He simply slid the card back across the polished counter. "The machine is working perfectly, Mr. Sterling. The bank has declined the transaction. The code is specific. It indicates that the cardholder has reported unauthorized activity. The guests, the so-called business partners Bryce was trying to impress, began to shift in their seats. These were men who smelled blood in the water faster than sharks. They exchanged glances. I could imagine the whispers. They were wondering if Bryce was solvent. They were wondering if his talk of hedge funds and capital ventures was just smoke. And they were right. It was all smoke. And I had just opened a window to let the wind blow it all away. Bryce laughed. It was a nervous, hollow sound. "This is ridiculous." He patted his pockets, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He pulled out his personal wallet. It was a sleek leather piece, monogrammed with initials that he felt gave him importance. He pulled out a debit card. "Try this one." The manager took it. He inserted it. The machine thought for a second. Then, a sharp electronic beep echoed through the room. Declined. Bryce's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. He turned to Jasmine. "Give me your card." Jasmine froze. She looked at the guests. She looked at the waiters who had stopped serving. She looked at her husband, who was currently stripping away the last shred of their family's dignity. She opened her clutch. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped a tube of lipstick. It rolled across the floor, stopping at the shoe of a waiter who didn't move to pick it up. She handed Bryce her card. It was the supplementary card linked to my account, the same account I had just locked. The result was the same. Declined. The atmosphere in the room shifted from awkwardness to open hostility. One of the investors, a man named Mr. Henderson, who Bryce had been bragging about all night, stood up. He placed his napkin on the table. "Bryce," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "perhaps we should reschedule. It seems you have some personal matters to attend to." "No, please, sit down," Bryce pleaded. He grabbed a bottle of wine from the bar, clutching it like a lifeline. "We are just sorting out a technical glitch." "We are leaving," Henderson said. He signaled to the other men. They all stood up. It was a mass exodus. They didn't look at Bryce. They looked through him. They were already erasing him from their contact lists. The manager stepped forward, blocking Bryce's path. "Mr. Sterling, the outstanding bill is $7,400, plus gratuity. We cannot let you leave the premises until this is settled. If you cannot pay, we will be forced to involve the authorities. Theft of services is a serious offense." Bryce looked around the room. The party was gone. The balloons looked sad and deflated. The food was getting cold. Leo was sitting in the corner, swinging his legs, oblivious to the fact that his father's reputation was burning to the ground. Bryce had no choice. He had to bleed. He opened his wallet and dumped everything onto the bar. Cash, a few $100s. He made Jasmine empty her purse, another $50. It wasn't enough. "I need to make a call," Bryce hissed. He stepped away, pulling out his phone. He dialed my number. I watched the screen of my phone light up on the passenger seat of my truck as I drove home. I let it ring. I imagined him listening to my voicemail, his rage building with every beep. He hung up. He dialed again. I let it ring again. Back in the restaurant, Bryce was forced to do the one thing he hated more than anything in the world. He had to beg. He had to write a promissory note, leaving his vintage Rolex watch as collateral. The watch was a fake, a high-quality replica he had bought in Chinatown. But the manager didn't know that yet. Bryce signed the paper, grabbed Jasmine by the arm, and dragged her and Leo out the back door. He couldn't face the front entrance. He couldn't risk seeing me, or anyone else who might witness his shame. The drive back to my house must have been a nightmare. I was sitting in my living room, the only light coming from the fireplace, when I heard his car screech into the driveway. It wasn't a park. It was an assault on the pavement. I didn't move. I stayed in my leather armchair, the one with the cracked armrest that molded perfectly to my back. On the coffee table in front of me sat my cleaning kit, oil, rags, and my 12-gauge Remington shotgun. I had disassembled the barrel and was slowly, methodically wiping down the firing pin. The smell of gun oil and old wood filled the room. It was a scent that calmed me. It reminded me of hunting trips in Georgia, long before I had money, when survival was about patience and precision. The front door didn't open. It exploded inward. Bryce didn't use a key. He kicked it. The wood splintered around the lock. He stormed in, bringing the cold wind with him. Jasmine trailed behind him, holding a sleeping Leo, her face streaked with mascara tears. She took one look at me and ran upstairs to Leo's room, closing the door. She knew what was coming. She was smart enough to get out of the line of fire. Bryce marched into the living room. He looked disheveled. His tie was undone. His hair was a mess. He looked like a man who had lost a fight with a tornado. "You senile old fool," Bryce screamed. His voice shook the walls. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any concept of the damage you just caused?" I didn't look up. I picked up a small flannel rag and dipped it in the oil. I began to rub the stock of the gun. Circular motions, slow, deliberate. "Look at me when I am talking to you," Bryce roared. He kicked the coffee table. The oil bottle wobbled, but didn't fall. "You humiliated me. You made me look like a beggar in front of the most important investors in the city." Henderson walked out. "Do you hear me?" He walked out. "That deal was worth millions." "It was worth nothing," I said softly. My voice was low, barely a whisper. But in the quiet room, it carried more weight than his shouting. "Because you have nothing to invest, Bryce. You were using my money to buy their respect." "That is my money," Bryce spat. He pointed a finger at me. A finger that had never done a hard day's labor in its life. "You promised to support this family. You promised Jasmine. And instead, you pull a stunt like this? Because of what? Because you didn't get a seat at the table?" He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You think you belong at that table, Russell? Look at you. You are sitting in the dark cleaning a gun like some redneck hillbilly. You spent your whole life driving trucks. You smell like diesel and cheap coffee. You think putting on a suit makes you one of us? You are a grease monkey who got lucky. You are a glorified delivery boy." He took a step closer. His shadow fell over me. "The only reason people tolerate you is because of the checkbook. Without that, you are nothing. You are invisible. And tonight, you embarrass the only person who is actually trying to elevate this family's status." I stopped cleaning. I set the rag down. I picked up the barrel of the shotgun. I didn't point it at him. I simply held it up to the light, checking the bore for dust. The metal gleamed, cold and dark. I snapped the barrel back onto the stock. The sound was distinct. It was the mechanical clack of steel locking into place. It was a sound that every man knows instinctively. It is the sound of a conversation ending. I slowly pumped the action. Ch-clack. Bryce stopped mid-sentence. His mouth was open, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the gun, then he looked at my eyes. For the first time that night, he really looked at me. He didn't see the old man who paid the bills. He saw the man who had driven solo runs through the darkest highways of America in the 70s. He saw the man who had faced down hijackers and union busters and came out standing. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just looked at him with a gaze that was empty of anger and full of something much worse. Indifference. I looked at him like he was a bug on my windshield, a nuisance. The silence stretched. The clock on the mantel ticked. Bryce swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. The arrogance drained out of his posture. He took a step back, then another. He realized that in this room, in this house, his suits and his words meant absolutely nothing. He was standing on my territory, and he had just realized that the old lion he thought was toothless still had claws. "Get out of my light, Bryce," I said. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He turned around and walked out of the room, his footsteps much quieter than when he entered. He went upstairs to the guest room. I heard the door lock click. I went back to cleaning my gun. I wasn't done yet. The barrel was clean, but the house was still dirty, and I was going to need more than a rag to clean up the mess Bryce had made. This was just the beginning. I picked up the phone again. It was time to initiate phase 2. I dialed the number of a private investigator I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. The night was young, and I had a lot of work to do. The next morning, the sky over Chicago was a flat, bruised gray, matching the feeling in the pit of my stomach. I did not sleep well. The image of Bryce's face, twisted with entitlement, kept replaying in my mind. But more than that, I saw Leo sitting alone in the corner of that restaurant. I needed to see him. I needed to know that my grandson did not think I had abandoned him. I drove my truck to St. Jude's Academy, the private elementary school where I paid $25,000 a year for Leo's tuition. I arrived just as the morning bell was ringing. I parked in the visitor lot, grabbed the wooden truck from the passenger seat, and walked to the front office. The receptionist was a woman named Mrs. Higgins. We had spoken many times. I was the one who picked Leo up every Tuesday and Thursday, while Jasmine was at yoga and Bryce was pretending to work. She usually greeted me with a smile and a comment about the weather. Today she did not smile. She looked down at her desk, shuffling papers that did not need shuffling. "Good morning, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "I'm just here to drop off a birthday gift for Leo. I missed giving it to him yesterday." She finally looked up. Her eyes were sympathetic, but her jaw was set tight. "Mr. Hayes, I cannot let you do that." I frowned. "It is just a toy truck. You can check it. It is made of wood. It is not about the toy," she said softly. She lowered her voice, leaning over the counter. "Mr. Sterling called the principal first thing this morning. He updated the custodial list. You have been removed, Mr. Hayes. You are not authorized to pick up Leo, visit him, or leave items for him. If you do not leave the premises, we are instructed to call the police." The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Removed, just like that. I was the one who wrote the check for the new gymnasium. I was the one who volunteered to fix the playground equipment when the contractor quoted them triple the price. But legal paperwork does not care about generosity. It cares about signatures, and Bryce, as the father, had the signature. I looked at the closed door leading to the classrooms. Leo was just 50 feet away. I could probably hear his laugh if I listened hard enough. But he might as well have been on the moon. Bryce knew exactly where to hit me. He knew he could not hurt me with insults, so he was using the one thing I loved more than life itself as a weapon. He was holding my grandson hostage to force me to open the bank vault. "I understand," I said to Mrs. Higgins. My voice was steady, though my hands wanted to tear the counter off the wall. "I will not cause trouble here." I turned and walked out. The wooden truck felt heavy in my hand, like a brick. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the school gate. I did not cry. Crying is for men who have run out of options. I had not run out of options. I was just changing the rules of engagement. I was halfway home when my phone rang. The screen flashed, Jasmine. I pulled over to the side of the road, near an old industrial park that smelled of rust and wet concrete. I took a deep breath before I answered. "Hello, Jasmine." "Daddy." Her voice was small, trembling. It sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "Why did you have to do that? Why did you have to humiliate him?" I gripped the steering wheel. "I did not humiliate him, Jasmine. He humiliated himself. He tried to spend money that wasn't his. He is under so much pressure," she sobbed. "You don't understand the stress he is under with this new venture. He loves us, Daddy. He just wanted everything to be perfect for Leo. And you ruined it. You made him look like a failure in front of the people who could change our lives." I listened to her, and my heart broke. Not because she was angry, but because she wasn't speaking her own words. She was reciting a script. I could hear Bryce's voice in hers. This is what manipulators do. They don't just control your finances, they colonize your mind. They rewrite your reality until you apologize for being hit. "Jasmine, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "He is lying to you. There is no venture. There are no investors. He is draining us dry." "No!" she screamed, and the sound distorted the speaker. "Stop it. Stop trying to tear us apart. He told me you would say that. He told me you were jealous because he is educated and you were just old-fashioned." "Is that what he said?" I asked. "He says he can fix this," she continued, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. He says if you just apologize and unlock the credit cards, he can explain it to the investors as a bank error. Please, Daddy. For me. For Leo. He is so angry. He has been breaking things all morning. I am scared, Daddy. Just give him what he wants. That last sentence was the key. I am scared. She wasn't asking for money because she was greedy. She was asking because she was terrified of what he would do if the money didn't come. Bryce was a coward, and cowards get violent when they get cornered. I cannot do that, baby girl, I said. If I give him the money, I am paying him to abuse you. I am funding his tyranny. I cannot do that. Then don't call us, she said. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of the cab. The severance was complete. He had taken my money, my pride, and now my daughter. He thought he had won. He thought that by cutting me off, he would starve me of affection until I surrendered. But Bryce made a critical error in judgment. He thought I was a sentimental old man. He forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was a businessman. And in business, when someone steals from you, you don't beg, you audit. I started the engine and turned the truck around. I wasn't going home. I was going to the one place where emotions didn't exist, only numbers. I drove downtown, past the gleaming skyscrapers, to a small, nondescript office building on the edge of the financial district. This was the office of Elias Thorne. Elias was my former CFO. He had retired 5 years ago, but he kept a small office to handle private accounts for a select few clients. Elias was a man who could look at a spreadsheet and tell you what someone had for dinner 3 years ago. He was the best forensic accountant in the Midwest. I walked in. Elias was sitting behind a desk piled high with files. He looked up, pushing his thick glasses up his nose. "Russell," he said, "you look like you are ready to kill someone." "Not yet," I said, sitting down. "I need you to dig, Elias. I need you to find out where the money went." Elias didn't ask why. He knew Bryce. He had never liked him. He opened his laptop. "What are we looking for?" "Everything," I said. "I want to know about the $200,000 I gave them for the down payment on the house last year. I want to know about the college fund for Leo. I want to know about every single transaction on the supplementary cards." Elias cracked his knuckles and started typing. The room was silent except for the rhythmic clicking of the keyboard. I watched him work. I felt a strange sense of calm. This was a battlefield I understood. Facts, figures, paper trails. These were things that didn't lie. Jasmine could be manipulated. Bryce could lie. But the numbers always told the truth. It took him an hour. It felt like a lifetime. Finally, the printer in the corner whirred to life. It spit out 3 sheets of paper. Elias picked them up. He read them, and his face went pale. He looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw him hesitate. "Russell," he said, "you are not going to like this." "Give it to me," I said. He slid the papers across the desk. I picked them up. My eyes scanned the columns, the dates, the amounts, the recipients. The $200,000 for the house down payment? It never went to a title company. It was wired to a shell company in Delaware called Sterling Consulting. And from there, it was transferred to a dealership. "He didn't buy the house," Elias said quietly. "He is renting it. The lease is in his name. The money you gave him, he bought a car, a Porsche 911 GT3. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He was living in a rental house, letting my daughter believe they owned it, while he drove a car worth more than her college education. "Keep looking," I said. Elias pointed to the second page. "This is the college fund, or what is left of it. He has been withdrawing cash, large amounts, 9,000 here, 5,000 there. And look at the location of the ATM withdrawals." I looked. They were all in the same zip code, a high-end residential district on the north side. Not where they lived, not where he worked. "And there is this," Elias said, sliding the final page over. "Recurring payments, $3,000 a month, to a luxury apartment complex called the Meridian." I stared at the name. The Meridian. That wasn't an office. That was a residence. "He is keeping someone," I said. The realization was not a shock. It was a confirmation. A man who steals from his family usually has a vice that needs feeding. Bryce's vice wasn't just gambling or drugs. It was another life. "Print it all," I said. "Every single page." Elias hit the print button. The machine began to churn out the evidence of my son-in-law's betrayal. Hundreds of pages. Each one a nail in his coffin. I stood up. I took the stack of papers. They were warm from the printer. I felt their weight. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a criminal investigation. I had the weapon I needed. Now, I just needed to verify the target. I thanked Elias and walked out into the cold afternoon. The gray sky didn't look depressing anymore. It looked like the color of steel. I got into my truck and looked at the address of the Meridian Apartments. It was time to meet the other beneficiary of my hard-earned money. Bryce wanted to play games with lists. He wanted to keep me off the guest list? Fine. I was about to add myself to a list he never expected me to be on. The list of people who knew his dirty little secret. And unlike the restaurant, I wouldn't need a reservation for where I was going next. The rain in Chicago does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. I sat in my truck across the street from the Meridian, a glass tower that pierced the gray skyline like a shard of ice. My windshield wipers slapped back and forth, keeping time with the slow, burning anger in my chest. Elias gave me the address, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to see where my money was going. It wasn't going into a college savings plan. It wasn't going into a mortgage. It was going right through the revolving doors of this luxury high-rise. I didn't have to wait long. At 2 in the afternoon, the garage gate opened. A silver Porsche 911 GT3 slid out onto the wet pavement. It was a beautiful machine, the kind of car that screams success. I knew exactly how much it cost because I had seen the wire transfer for the down payment. It was my money on those wheels. But Bryce wasn't driving. A woman was behind the wheel. She was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair that fell over a designer leather jacket. She looked nothing like my daughter. Jasmine has worry lines around her eyes and wears sensible shoes because she is always running after Leo. This woman looked like she had never run for anything in her life. She looked expensive. I put my truck in gear and followed her. I kept a safe distance. I have driven over 2 million miles in my life. I know how to tail a vehicle without being seen. She drove to a high-end organic grocery store, the kind where a bag of apples costs more than a tank of gas. I parked 2 rows back and watched. She stepped out of the car, careless with the door, not worrying about scratches. She walked with a bounce in her step. Why wouldn't she bounce? She was living a life subsidized by a man she probably thought was a genius investor. She didn't know she was actually being funded by a retired truck driver who was currently clutching his steering wheel hard enough to turn his knuckles white. I watched her come out 20 minutes later. She wasn't carrying diapers or bulk rice or discount laundry detergent like Jasmine. She was carrying 2 small bags of gourmet food and a bottle of wine. She laughed at something on her phone as she loaded the bags into the front trunk of the Porsche. That car represented Leo's future. It represented the security I had promised my wife Etta on her deathbed. Etta had made me swear to look after Jasmine, and here I was, watching a stranger drive away with my promise wrapped in German engineering. I didn't confront her, not yet. A general does not attack the infantry when he is hunting the commander. I needed to know the full extent of the battlefield. I waited until she drove back to the apartment complex. I watched her valet the car. I watched her disappear into the lobby. I wrote down the time. I wrote down the license plate. Then I turned my truck toward home. My house was quiet and empty, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. I knew Jasmine would come. Bryce was desperate, and when Bryce was desperate, he sent his wife to do his begging. Sure enough, just after sunset, headlights swept across my living room wall. It was Jasmine's minivan. It was 6 years old, with a dent in the rear bumper that Bryce had promised to fix 2 years ago. The contrast made my stomach turn. The mistress drove a Porsche. The wife drove a beat-up van. I opened the door before she could knock. Jasmine looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy. She was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather. She shivered as she stepped inside, but I didn't think it was just from the cold. "Daddy," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't think you would be awake." "I am always awake," I said. "Come in, Jasmine. Sit down." She sat on the edge of the sofa, perched like a bird ready to fly away. She refused the tea I offered. She wrung her hands together. I looked at her hands. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. That was new. Or maybe she had sold it. "I need to ask you something," she started, looking at the floor. "And please, before you get mad, just listen." "I am listening," I said. "We are a little short this month," she said. "Just a cash flow issue. The investors haven't released the funds for Bryce's project yet, and we have bills, big bills." "How much?" I asked. I kept my voice flat. 5,000, she whispered, just to tide us over. For groceries, for the house, and for Leo's school. They sent a notice today. I looked at my daughter. I saw the lie sitting heavy on her shoulders. She was a terrible liar. She had been raised to tell the truth. Bryce had turned her into this, a beggar in her own father's house. $5,000, I repeated, and you need it in cash. Yes, she said quickly. The bank account is frozen. You know that, because of what you did yesterday. So cash would be best. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the dark street. I knew exactly where that cash would go. It wouldn't go to groceries. It would go to the Meridian. It would go to keeping the Porsche on the road. It would go to maintaining the illusion that Bryce was a big shot. I cannot give you cash, Jasmine, I said. Her head snapped up. Daddy, please. We have nothing in the fridge. Leo is eating cereal for dinner. Then I will buy you groceries, I said, turning to face her. I will fill your pantry. I will fill your freezer. I will come over there right now with a trunk full of food. But I will not give you $5,000 in cash. She stood up, her face flushing with anger. Why do you have to be so controlling? You have the money. It sits in your account doing nothing. Why do you have to verify every penny I spend? Do you think I am a child? Do you think I am a drug addict? No, I said. I think you are a victim. I am a wife, she shouted. I am trying to support my husband. Why can you not just help us without making it a lesson? Because I am done funding his lies, I said. My voice rose, just a little. I will not pay for his mistakes anymore. She grabbed her purse. Fine. If you won't help us, we will find someone who will. Bryce was right. You just want to see him fail. You want to see us on the street so you can say I told you so. Jasmine, I said, reaching out for her. Don't, she said, pulling away. She walked to the door. Just don't. She slammed the door behind her. I watched her get into the minivan. I watched her back out, nearly hitting the mailbox. My heart ached. I wanted to run after her. I wanted to give her the money just to stop her pain. But that is what I had been doing for 5 years. And look where it had gotten us. The wound was infected. Putting a Band-Aid on it wouldn't help. I had to cut it open. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, thinking about what she said. Leo's school. They sent a notice. That part stuck in my head. I had given Jasmine a check for the full semester's tuition 2 months ago, $12,000. I had written it to her so she could deposit it and pay the school online, like she always did. She said it made Bryce feel better if the payment came from their family account. If the school was sending notices, where was that money? The next morning, I didn't call. I acted. I put on my best suit. I drove to St. Jude's Academy. I didn't go to the reception desk where Mrs. Higgins would turn me away. I went straight to the administration building, to the bursar's office. I knew the bursar, Mr. Henderson. He was a fair man. I walked in without an appointment. Mr. Henderson looked surprised, but he didn't kick me out. Russell, he said, I heard about the incident at the restaurant, and the restricted list. I am afraid I cannot give you any information about Leo. I am not here to pick up Leo, I said, placing my checkbook on his desk. I am here to pay a bill. My daughter told me there was a notice regarding Leo's tuition. I want to clear the balance. Mr. Henderson hesitated. He looked at his computer screen. Then he looked at me with a pained expression. Russell, usually I would say yes. We always appreciate prompt payment, but the situation is more complicated than a missed month. What do you mean? I asked. He turned the monitor so I could see. The balance wasn't $5,000. It was $25,000. No payment has been made for this academic year, Mr. Henderson said softly. Not a cent. We have sent 3 warnings. The deadline was yesterday. Technically, Leo is no longer enrolled. We were just waiting until the end of the week to inform the teachers. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk. But I wrote a check, I said. 2 months ago, $12,000. Mr. Henderson shook his head. We never received it, Russell. I closed my eyes. I saw it all clearly. The check I gave Jasmine. She must have given it to Bryce. And Bryce saw $12,000 and saw a down payment on a Porsche. He saw a month of rent at the Meridian. He looked at his own son's education and decided it was less important than his ego. He stole from his own child. It wasn't just greed anymore. Greed I could understand. Greed is human. This was something else. This was a complete absence of morality. To let your 5-year-old son be kicked out of school, to let him lose his friends, his routine, his safe space, just so you can play rich man with a mistress. That is not human. That is monstrous. My sadness evaporated. The pity I felt for Jasmine the night before hardened into cold steel. I opened my checkbook. My hand was steady. I wrote a check for $25,000. I ripped it out and placed it on the desk. "Clear the balance," I said. "And Mr. Henderson, prepay for next year too." I wrote another check. Mr. Henderson looked at me. "Russell, are you sure? If the parents have lost custody of the financial responsibility—" "Take the money," I said. "Keep Leo in class. Do not tell them I paid it. Just tell them the account is settled." I walked out of the office. The sun was shining, but I didn't feel any warmth. I felt cold, deadly cold. Bryce Sterling had crossed the final line. He had targeted the innocent. He had endangered my grandson. I walked to my truck. I didn't go home. I took out my phone and called my doctor. "Dr. Evans," I said when he answered. "Russell, is everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need a favor, a big one. I need you to admit me to the hospital." "What? Why? You are healthy as a horse." "I know," I said, "but Bryce doesn't know that. I need to look weak, Doc. I need to look like I am dying, because I need him to come to me. I need him to feel safe enough to try and take the rest of it." There was a silence on the line. "Russell, what are you planning?" "I am planning a funeral," I said, "but not mine." I hung up. It was time to play dead. It was time to let the vulture come for the carcass, only to find out the trap was already set. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room was sharp enough to burn the inside of my nose. It was the smell of sickness and endings. To most people, this room would be a nightmare. To me, it was a stage. I was lying in a bed with railings pulled up, hooked to a monitor that beeped with a steady, rhythmic pulse. Dr. Evans had done his job perfectly. He had admitted me under a diagnosis of acute cardiac distress brought on by hypertension. It was vague enough to be terrifying, but specific enough to be believable for a man of my age. 2 hours ago, I had walked into the lobby of my bank, the main branch on 5th Avenue. I waited until the line was long. I waited until the cameras were watching. And then, I didn't just fall, I crumbled. I let my legs give out, grabbing my chest, gasping for air like a fish thrown onto the dock. I saw the panic in the teller's eyes. I heard the gasps of the customers. It was the greatest performance of my life. I wasn't acting for them, though. I was acting for the audience of one who would hear about it later. By the time the paramedics arrived, my blood pressure was actually high, purely from the adrenaline of the deception. Now, I lay still. My skin was pale, not from illness, but because I hadn't eaten since the day before. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I made my hands tremble whenever I moved them. The door to my room was closed, but I could hear footsteps approaching. Fast, heavy footsteps. The click of hard-soled shoes on linoleum. The door swung open. Bryce didn't knock. Vultures do not knock when they spot a carcass. He rushed in, his face a mask of practiced concern. He was wearing a navy suit, impeccable as always, but his tie was slightly askew, a calculated detail to show he had rushed here. Jasmine was right behind him, her face streaked with fresh tears. "Dad," she cried, rushing to my bedside. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was desperate. "Oh my God, Dad, the bank called us. They said you collapsed." I looked at her, letting my eyes struggle to focus. "I am okay, baby girl," I whispered. My voice was raspy. I needed water, but I didn't ask for it. The weaker I sounded, the better. Just a little tired. Bryce stepped forward. He placed a hand on Jasmine's shoulder, squeezing it. It looked supportive, but I knew it was possessive. He was asserting his place. "Russell," he said. His voice was deep, serious. "The doctor said it was a severe hypertensive crisis. You could have had a stroke. You could have died." I looked at him. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't looking at a father-in-law. He was looking at an obstacle that was finally removing itself. "I am fine, Bryce," I wheezed. "Just stress." "Stress," Bryce repeated, shaking his head. He looked at Jasmine. "See? I told you. He is taking on too much. Managing the accounts, the properties, the legal battles. It is killing him." Jasmine nodded, sobbing. "You need to rest, Dad. You cannot keep doing this." I closed my eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. The monitor beeped a little faster. I had learned how to control my breathing to manipulate the machine. Shallow breaths raised the heart rate. Bryce leaned in closer. "Russell, we need to talk about reality. You are not 20 anymore. You cannot handle the complexity of your estate. Look at what happened with the school. Look at the restaurant. You are confused. You are making mistakes. And now your body is shutting down." I opened my eyes and looked at him. "What do you want, Bryce?" "I want to help you," he said. He reached into his leather briefcase. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet room. He pulled out a blue folder. It was thick. "I had my lawyer draw these up this morning," he said, placing the folder on the bedside table. "It is a durable power of attorney. It gives me and Jasmine the authority to handle your finances, your medical decisions, and your assets while you recover. It is just temporary, Russell, just until you are back on your feet." I looked at the folder. It was the key to the kingdom. If I signed that, Bryce could drain my accounts, sell my house, and liquidate my investments before I was even discharged. He could legally steal everything I had built. "I don't know, Bryce," I said, making my hand shake as I reached for the water cup. I need to read it." Bryce sighed, a sound of immense patience. "Russell, it is standard boilerplate. Jasmine has already read it. Haven't you, honey?" Jasmine looked up, her eyes wide and red. Yes. Bryce explained it to me. It just lets us pay the bills, Dad, so you don't have to worry." He had gaslighted her into signing her own inheritance away. "I need a moment," I said, with Jasmine outside. Bryce stiffened. "Russell, I don't think—" "Please," I whispered. "Just a minute with my daughter." Bryce clenched his jaw, but he nodded. He was so close to the prize, he could afford to be generous. "Take your time," he said. "I will go get some coffee." He walked out. As soon as the door clicked shut, I squeezed Jasmine's hand. This time, my grip wasn't weak. It was firm. "Jasmine," I said. My voice was stronger. "Do you trust him?" She blinked. "Dad, of course. He is my husband." "Do you trust him more than you trust me?" She looked away. "Dad, please. Don't make me choose. He is just trying to save the family." I looked at her. I saw the fear. I saw the exhaustion. She was broken. If I told her the truth now, she wouldn't believe me. She would tell Bryce, and the trap would fail. I had to protect her by lying to her. "Okay," I said, letting go of her hand. "Okay, send him back in." She kissed my forehead. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, baby girl. Now go." She left. A minute later, Bryce returned. He looked energized. He probably thought I had said my goodbyes. He walked to the bed, opened the folder, and uncapped a heavy, expensive fountain pen. "Are we ready?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I cannot read the fine print, Bryce. My eyes are blurry." "Don't worry," he said, flipping to the last page. "I summarized it for you. You just need to sign here." And here, he pointed to the signature lines. The papers were clipped together at the top. "I need to sit up," I said. "Here, let me help." He adjusted the bed, raising the back. I reached for the folder. My hands were shaking violently. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the floor, rolling under the bed. "Oh, for God's sake," Bryce muttered. He bent down to retrieve it. That was the moment. The sleight of hand. In the trucking world, you play a lot of cards while waiting for loads. You learn how to move things without people seeing. You learn misdirection. While Bryce was bent over, searching for the pen in the shadows of the hospital bed, my left hand moved like a striking cobra. I had a document hidden under my back, beneath the thin hospital sheet. It wasn't a power of attorney. It was a document Elias and I had drafted. It was a confession of judgment and personal guarantee. It stated that the signer acknowledged full personal liability for all debts incurred on the Hayes accounts, admitted to unauthorized use of funds, and agreed to immediate repayment of $200,000, using his personal assets as collateral. I slid the power of attorney signature page out from the clip. It was loose, as I knew Bryce wouldn't staple it until it was signed to keep it neat, and slid my document in its place. The formatting was identical. Same font, same margins, same signature of grantee line at the bottom. Bryce popped back up, holding the pen. "Got it." He placed the pen in my hand. He didn't look at the paper. He was looking at my face, watching for any sign of hesitation. He was so focused on my eyes, on my defeat, that he didn't look at what was sitting on the tray table. I signed. My signature was shaky, barely legible, but it was there. "Okay," I wheezed. "Now you." "Me?" Bryce asked. "Yes," I said. "You have to sign to accept the authority. Otherwise, the bank won't honor it. You know that." "Of course," he said. He was arrogant. He didn't read. Why would he? He brought the papers. He thought he controlled the paper trail. He took the pen. He bent over the table. "Sign it, Bryce," I thought. "Sign your life away." He pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed. Bryce Sterling. A large, sweeping signature with a flourish at the end. The signature of a man who thought he had just won the lottery. He capped the pen. He smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "You did the right thing, Russell," he said. He closed the folder. "I will take care of everything. You just sleep." I watched him put the folder back in his briefcase. He had just signed a confession that would hold up in any court in Illinois. He had just legally admitted to being a thief and agreed to pay me back every cent. "I will sleep now," I said, closing my eyes. "Rest well, old man," Bryce said. There was no warmth in his voice anymore, only triumph. He walked out of the room. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I opened my eyes. I reached for the monitor controls and silenced the beeping. I wasn't shaking anymore. I sat up, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it in one long gulp. The trap was sprung. The rat had taken the cheese. Now, all I had to do was wait for the snap. The hospital room was quiet, but my mind was louder than a diesel engine on a steep grade. I lay in the bed, the heart monitor chirping a steady rhythm that I had learned to ignore. To the nurses and the doctors, I was a sleeping old man, recovering from a near-fatal hypertensive crisis. To the rest of the world, I was Russell Hayes, a retired trucker who had finally succumbed to the weight of his age. But underneath the thin hospital blanket, holding a tablet with the screen brightness turned down low, I was a hunter watching his prey step directly into the crosshairs. Bryce Sterling did not go home to comfort his weeping wife after leaving my bedside. He did not go to pick up his son from school. He went straight to the celebration he felt he finally deserved. I watched the GPS dot of the Porsche moved across the map of Chicago. It stopped at the Meridian. It stayed there for an hour. Then it moved to a high-end shopping district on Michigan Avenue. I received a notification on my secure banking app. It was not a withdrawal, because I had frozen the cards, but it was an attempt, a decline at a Cartier boutique. Bryce was trying to buy a diamond tennis bracelet. He was probably standing there, embarrassed, explaining to the sales clerk that it was a bank error. I could imagine the sweat on his forehead. But Bryce was resourceful when it came to his vices. 10 minutes later, I saw a withdrawal from a joint savings account he shared with Jasmine, $5,000. It was the last of their liquid cash. He bought a smaller bracelet. He bought a bottle of Dom Perignon. He was celebrating the signing of the power of attorney. He thought the document was his golden ticket. He thought that by tomorrow morning he would have access to my entire portfolio. He was already spending the millions he thought he had stolen. I switched the feed on my tablet to the camera I had installed in the hallway of his rental house. It was empty. Jasmine was likely in the kitchen, or picking up Leo. Bryce was with the mistress, popping champagne, toasting to the death of the old man and the rise of the new king. The arrogance of a man like Bryce is his blind spot. He believes he is the smartest person in the room because he wears the most expensive suit. He believes that because I spent my life in work boots, I cannot possibly understand the complexities of finance. He sees me as a resource to be mined, not a mind to be feared. He was about to learn that the hardest lessons in life do not come from a university lecture hall. They come from the school of hard knocks, and I was the dean of admissions. While Bryce was busy playing the tycoon with his mistress, my next piece on the chessboard was moving into position. I had made a call earlier that morning to an old associate of mine named Mr. Wallace. Wallace was not a trucker. He was a retired actor who had found that he had a talent for corporate con games. He looked like old money. He spoke with a transatlantic accent that sounded like it cost money to listen to. I had hired him for a specific role. I called it the angel investor. I watched the surveillance feed from the private club where Bryce had moved his celebration. Wallace walked in. He was wearing a bespoke suit and a watch that cost more than Bryce's car. He sat at the bar, 2 seats away from Bryce. He ordered a scotch, neat, and started talking to the bartender about his latest acquisition in Silicon Valley. He spoke loud enough for Bryce to hear, but not so loud that it seemed staged. I saw Bryce's ears perk up. It was like watching a dog hear a can opener. Bryce turned. He saw the suit. He saw the watch. He saw the opportunity. "Excuse me," Bryce said, leaning over. I couldn't help but overhear. "You are in venture capital?" Wallace turned slowly. He looked Bryce up and down, assessing him. "I am. And you are?" "Bryce Sterling," Bryce said, extending his hand. "I manage a private equity fund. Sterling Ventures." I almost laughed out loud in my hospital bed. Sterling Ventures was a checking account with $12 in it. Wallace smiled. A shark recognizing another shark. Or rather, a shark recognizing a seal dressed as a shark. "Pleasure. I am Charles. I am actually looking for local partners for a high-yield project. Artificial intelligence infrastructure. The returns are projected at 300% in the first quarter. But I prefer to keep the circle small." Bryce's eyes widened. This was the language he spoke. Fast money, high returns, exclusive circles. He didn't ask for a business plan. He didn't ask for due diligence. He just heard 300%. "Tell me more," Bryce said. Wallace lowered his voice. "It is a buy-in situation, Mr. Sterling. The window closes on Friday. I need liquidity to secure the server farms. $2 million is the entry point. But for a local partner, someone who knows the Chicago landscape, I might be able to squeeze you in for $500,000. 500,000. That was the magic number. It was enough to be significant, but low enough that Bryce would think he could scrape it together from my accounts. "I can do that," Bryce said without hesitation. "I can have the funds by tomorrow." Wallace nodded. "Excellent. But I need a good faith deposit today, cash or assets, just to show you are serious. The board is very strict." Bryce hesitated. He knew his cards were frozen. He knew the power of attorney wouldn't be processed by the bank until the next business day. He needed a bridge. "I have assets," Bryce said, "tangible assets." Wallace checked his watch. "I have a flight to Zurich tonight. Meet me at the lounge in the Drake Hotel at 8. Bring the deposit. If you are serious, we will make you a very rich man, Mr. Sterling." Wallace stood up, finished his drink, and walked out. Bryce sat there, staring at his empty champagne glass. He looked manic. He looked like an addict who had just been promised the ultimate high. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call the bank. He called home. I switched the camera feed back to Jasmine's house. I saw her walking through the living room, holding a laundry basket. She looked exhausted. The phone rang. She answered it. "Hello? Get the safe open," Bryce screamed. I could hear his voice through the camera's microphone. "Get the black velvet box, the one with your mother's necklace." Jasmine stopped. She dropped the laundry basket. "Bryce, no. That is the only thing I have left of hers. You promised you would never touch it." "Do not argue with me," Bryce roared. "This is business. This is the deal of a lifetime. I need collateral. I will get it back tomorrow, I swear. Just have it ready. I am coming home." He hung up. Jasmine stood in the middle of the room, shaking. She sank to her knees and buried her face in her hands. I felt a surge of rage so powerful, I thought I would rip the IV out of my arm. That necklace was a gift I gave Etta on our 25th anniversary. It was sapphires and diamonds. It was worth $40,000, but to Jasmine, it was priceless. It was the memory of her mother, and Bryce was going to trade it for a lie. I couldn't jump out of bed and stop him. If I did, the whole plan would collapse. Bryce would know I was faking. He would know I was watching. I had to stay dead, but I could still send a ghost to protect her. I picked up my phone. I texted Jasmine. I knew she had her phone in her hand. "Baby girl, listen to me." I saw her look at the phone on the screen. She wiped her eyes. She read the message. "Do not fight him," I typed. "He is dangerous right now, but do not give him the necklace." She started typing back. "Dad, he is coming. He is going to hurt me if I don't give it to him. Go to the safe," I texted. "Lift the false bottom under the velvet lining. There is a blue box there. Inside is a replica. I had it made years ago for insurance purposes. It looks exactly the same. The real one is in my safety deposit box at the bank. I took it months ago when I saw him looking at it." I watched her on the screen. She stared at the phone. Then she ran to the wall safe, hidden behind the painting in the study. She spun the dial. She opened it. She lifted the lining. She found the blue box. She opened it. The necklace inside glittered under the room light. It was high-quality cubic zirconia and synthetic sapphires. To a layman, it looked real. To a pawnbroker, it would look real enough for a loan. But to a gemologist, it was glass. She quickly put the blue box on the desk and hid the black velvet box deep in the back of the safe. She closed it just as I heard the front door slam. Bryce stormed in. He was sweating. His eyes were wild. "Where is it?" he demanded. Jasmine stood by the desk. She was trembling, but she held her ground. She pointed to the box. Bryce lunged for it. He opened it. He looked at the necklace. He didn't look at Jasmine. He didn't see her tears. He only saw the $500,000 buy-in. "I told you I would take care of us," he said, snapping the box shut. "This is just a loan, Jasmine. I will buy you 10 of these next week." He didn't wait for her answer. He turned and ran out the door. I watched Jasmine collapse into the chair. She was sobbing, but she was safe, and the necklace was safe. I lay back in my hospital bed. I let out a long breath. Bryce was running to meet Wallace with a fake necklace to invest in a fake company using a fake reputation. He was digging his grave with both hands, and he was shoveling fast. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, all I had to do was wait for the steel jaws to snap shut. I closed my eyes, and finally, for the first time in 2 days, I slept. The nightmare was almost over. The reckoning was about to begin. The rain had turned into a sleet that coated the streets of Chicago in a layer of gray slush. It was fitting weather for a funeral, and Bryce Sterling was unknowingly attending his own. He parked his Porsche illegally in front of Gold & Stone, a high-end pawnbroker on Wabash Avenue that catered to the desperate elite. He didn't feed the meter. He didn't care. In his mind, he was 45 minutes away from securing a partnership that would make parking tickets irrelevant. He clutched the black velvet box in his pocket, as if it contained a human heart. He pushed through the heavy glass door. The shop smelled of old money and quiet despair. The broker, a man named Mr. Solomon, who wore a loop around his neck like a stethoscope, looked up from a ledger. He didn't smile. He knew why men like Bryce came in at 7 in the evening on a Tuesday. "I need a bridge loan," Bryce said, placing the box on the counter. He tried to sound casual, but his voice was tight. "I have a liquidity issue with a wire transfer. I need $50,000, cash. I will buy it back on Monday for 60. Mr. Solomon didn't answer. He opened the box. The sapphire necklace glittered under the halogen lights. It looked magnificent. It looked like a king's ransom. Bryce smirked. He felt the power returning to his veins. This was the necklace Jasmine's mother had worn to the opera. It was the real deal. Mr. Solomon picked up the necklace. He didn't gasp. He didn't admire it. He pulled his loop up to his eye and leaned in. The silence in the room was heavy. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Bryce tapped his fingers on the glass counter. "Come on," he thought. "Hurry up. Wallace is waiting." After a long minute, Mr. Solomon set the necklace back in the box. He took the loop off his eye and looked at Bryce with a flat, bored expression. "I cannot help you, Mr. Sterling." Bryce laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous sound. "What do you mean you cannot help me? That is a $40,000 piece. I am asking for 50 because I know its value has appreciated. Look at the clarity of the stones." Mr. Solomon pushed the box back across the counter. It slid with a soft hiss. "The setting is gold-plated," he said calmly. "The stones are high-grade cubic zirconia. The sapphires are synthetic corundum. It is a very nice replica, probably used for travel or display. It is worth maybe $300 on a good day." Bryce froze. The world tilted on its axis. "No," he stammered. "That is impossible. That is my mother-in-law's necklace. It is an heirloom." "It is a prop," Mr. Solomon said, turning back to his ledger. "Now please take your costume jewelry and leave. I have work to do." Bryce stood there. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at the necklace. It still glittered, but now the shine looked cheap. It looked mocking. And then the realization hit him like a freight train. Jasmine. She hadn't just handed it over. She had gone into the safe. She had access. She must have switched it. A dark, twisting rage exploded in his chest. It wasn't the embarrassment of the rejection that burned him. It was the betrayal. His wife, the woman who was supposed to be his silent partner, his doormat, had outsmarted him. She had sabotaged the deal. She had ruined him. He grabbed the box and stormed out of the shop. He kicked the door open, ignoring the alarm that chirped. He got into his car. his hands shaking so hard he could barely put the key in the ignition. He screamed. He screamed until his throat was raw, pounding the steering wheel until the leather cracked. "She thinks she can play games," he hissed to the empty car. "She thinks she can hide things from me." He drove home like a maniac, running red lights, cutting off taxis. The deal with Wallace was dead. He didn't have the money. He didn't have the reputation. All he had was a fake necklace and a wife who needed to be taught a lesson in obedience. When he pulled into the driveway of the rental house, he didn't even turn off the engine. He left the car running, the headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. He ran to the front door and threw it open. "Jasmine!" he roared. Jasmine was in the living room, folding laundry. She looked up, terror instantly flooding her face. She saw the box in his hand. She knew. "You lying witch!" Bryce screamed. He threw the box at her. It hit the wall behind her head, spilling the fake diamonds onto the floor. "You switched it. You gave me glass." "Bryce, please," Jasmine cried, backing away. "I couldn't let you sell it. It is Mom's." "It is mine," Bryce yelled. "Everything in this house is mine. You are mine. And when I tell you to do something, you do it." He grabbed a vase from the entry table. It was a wedding gift from her aunt. He hurled it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace, sending shards of porcelain flying. Jasmine screamed and covered her face. "You ruined everything," Bryce ranted, pacing the room like a caged animal. "I had $2 million waiting for me. $2 million, and you stole it from me because you are selfish. You are just like your father, holding on to pennies while I am trying to build an empire." He kicked the coffee table, overturning it. Magazines and candles spilled everywhere. The noise was deafening. Upstairs in the hallway closet, Leo sat huddled among the winter coats. He had his hands over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. He was trembling. He wanted his grandpa. He wanted the man who smelled like sawdust and peppermint, not this monster who sounded like thunder. "Where is the real one?" Bryce demanded, advancing on Jasmine. "Where did you hide it?" "I don't have it," Jasmine sobbed, cornered against the bookshelf. "Dad took it. He took it months ago." Bryce stopped, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Russell, of course. The old man was dead in a hospital bed, and he was still pulling the strings. "He is going to pay for this," Bryce spat. "I am going to the hospital right now. I am going to wake him up, and I am going to make him sign over the deed to the house. I don't care if his heart stops. I am taking what is owed to me." He raised his hand. Jasmine flinched, closing her eyes, expecting the blow. But the blow never came. Instead, a voice cut through the chaos. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. It was deep, resonant, and colder than the bottom of Lake Michigan. "Touch her, and you will never use that hand again." Bryce spun around. Jasmine opened her eyes. Standing in the open doorway was not a dying man. It was not a patient in a hospital gown. It was Russell Hayes. But it wasn't the Russell they had seen yesterday. He wasn't wearing his flannel shirt or his work boots. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that fit him perfectly. His shirt was crisp white. His tie was silk. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, his spine as straight as a steel beam. The weakness was gone. The tremors were gone. The age seemed to have melted away, revealing the dangerous man who had built a fortune with his bare hands. He stepped into the room. The glass crunched under his polished dress shoes. He didn't look at the broken vase. He didn't look at the overturned table. He looked directly at Bryce. His eyes were dark and hard, void of any sympathy. "Dad," Jasmine whispered. She looked at him as if he were a ghost. "You were supposed to be dying," Russell finished for her. He didn't break eye contact with Bryce. "I know, that is what the script said, but I decided to rewrite the ending." Bryce took a step back. He looked confused, his brain struggling to process the image in front of him. You are sick. The doctor said—" "The doctor works for me," Russell said, taking another step forward. "The bank works for me, and as of this morning, when you signed that confession of judgment disguised as a power of attorney, you work for me too." "What are you talking about?" Bryce stammered. He tried to summon his arrogance, but it flickered and died in the face of Russell's intensity. "I have your power of attorney. I am in charge here." Russell reached into his inside jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately. "You signed a confession, Bryce. You admitted to embezzling $200,000. You admitted to fraud, and you guaranteed repayment with your personal assets. Bryce's face went white. No. I read it. It was a standard form. You read the first page, Russell said. You didn't read the page you signed. You were too busy counting your chickens before they hatched. Russell tossed the paper onto the floor at Bryce's feet. It landed next to the fake necklace. Pick it up, Russell said. Bryce stared at the paper. He didn't move. I said pick it up, Russell barked. The volume made Bryce jump. Bryce bent down and snatched the paper. He read it. His hands started to shake. He read the clause where he admitted to the theft. He read the clause where he waived his right to a trial. This is entrapment, Bryce whispered. This is business, Russell corrected. You wanted to play in the big leagues, Bryce. You wanted to be a player. Well, welcome to the game. This is how we play. When you steal from my family, I don't call the police. I take everything you have. Jasmine stood up slowly. She looked from her husband to her father. She saw the truth. She saw the man she married for the coward he was, and she saw the father she had underestimated for the titan he truly was. Get out, Jasmine said. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. Bryce looked at her. What? Get out of my house, she said louder. This is my house, Bryce snarled, trying to regain control. I pay the rent. Russell laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Actually, you don't. You haven't paid rent in 3 months. The landlord called me yesterday. I bought the lease this morning. I am your landlord now, Bryce, and I am evicting you. Bryce looked around the room. The walls were closing in. The exits were blocked. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he had been outmaneuvered at every turn. You cannot do this, Bryce said, his voice rising to a panic. I have rights. You have 48 hours, Russell cut him off. 48 hours to vacate the premises. If you are still here, I will have the sheriff remove you. And Bryce, if you try to take anything other than your clothes, if you try to take one single item that belongs to my daughter or my grandson, I will activate the clause in that document, and I will garnish your wages until you are 100 years old. Bryce looked at Russell. He saw the end of his world reflected in the old man's eyes. He didn't say another word. He couldn't. He turned and ran up the stairs. A moment later, we heard the sound of a suitcase being dragged across the floor. Russell walked over to Jasmine. He didn't hug her yet. He looked down at the mess on the floor. Where is Leo? He asked softly. In the closet, Jasmine whispered. Russell nodded. He adjusted his cuffs. Go help him pack, Jasmine. But check his bags. Make sure he doesn't take the silver. Russell walked past her towards the stairs. He wasn't going to help Bryce. He was going to get his grandson. He opened the closet door. Leo looked up, his eyes red from crying. When he saw his grandfather in the suit, looking like a superhero, he didn't ask questions. He just launched himself into Russell's arms. I got you, Russell whispered, lifting the boy up. I got you, and nobody is ever going to scare you again. The air in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Bryce stood at the foot of the stairs, his suitcase handle gripped in his hand, but he wasn't moving. The fear I had seen in his eyes moments ago had curdled into something uglier. It was a mix of desperation and deep-seated prejudice. He looked at me, standing there in my suit, and he didn't see a successful businessman or a protective grandfather. He saw an error in the natural order of things. He saw a man he felt superior to, simply by birthright, holding the keys to his existence. And that reality broke something inside him. You cannot kick me out, Bryce said. His voice was low, vibrating with a dark energy. This is my house. My name is on the deed. You gifted it to us. A gift is a gift. You cannot just take it back because you decided to play God today. I took a step closer to him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The silence of the house amplified every word. It was a conditional gift, Bryce. Do you know what the word conditional means? It means it comes with strings attached, and you just used those strings to hang yourself. Bryce dropped his suitcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He stepped over it, closing the distance between us. He was taller than me, younger, and in his mind, better. He puffed out his chest, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. But he forgot that I had stared down union busters with baseball bats in the 80s. A soft-handed investment broker was not going to make me flinch. You think you are so smart, Bryce spat. You think because you have a few $1 million in the bank, you are one of us. But you are not. You are just a historical accident. You are a lottery winner who got lucky hauling cargo. You don't belong in this neighborhood. You don't belong in this tax bracket. And you certainly don't belong at the head of this family." I watched him unravel. I let him talk. I wanted Jasmine to hear this. I wanted her to hear the thoughts he had kept hidden behind his charming smile all these years. "Jasmine didn't marry me for love, Russell," Bryce sneered, pointing a finger at my chest. "She married me because she needed to dilute the bloodline. She needed someone with pedigree to wash away the stain of your blue-collar past. She needed a white husband to open the doors that would always be slammed in your face." I heard a gasp from the kitchen doorway. Jasmine was standing there, her hand over her mouth. She had heard every word. Bryce didn't care. He was too far gone. "Look at Leo," Bryce continued, his eyes wild. "He has my eyes. He has my potential. He is going to be a king in this city because of me, because of my name. Not yours. You are just the bankroll, Russell. That is all you ever were, a wallet with a pulse. And now that the wallet is trying to give orders, it is time to remind you of your place." He poked me in the chest, hard. "My name is on the deed," he shouted. "Mine. And there is not a damn thing you or your high-priced lawyers can do about it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I am not leaving." I looked down at where his finger had touched my suit. I brushed the spot off, as if he had left a smear of dirt. I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor. "You are right about one thing, Bryce," I said calmly. "Your name is on the deed, but you didn't read the addendum." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the document I had brought with me. It wasn't the confession of judgment. It was a copy of the property title transfer from 5 years ago. "When I gave you this house, I had my lawyer include a clause. It is called a fee simple, determinable with a possibility of reverter." Bryce blinked. The legal jargon hit him like a bucket of ice water. "What?" "It is a standard property law concept," I explained, my voice smooth and educational. "It means that the ownership of the property is granted to you, so long as certain conditions are met. If those conditions are violated, the property automatically and immediately reverts back to the grantor. That means me." I opened the document and pointed to paragraph 14. The condition for this gift was that the property be used as the primary marital residence of Jasmine and Bryce Sterling, and that the grantee, that is you, maintains good moral standing without criminal or civil liability for fraud. I looked up at him. "You just signed a confession admitting to fraud, Bryce. You admitted to embezzling funds. That is a violation of the moral standing clause. And you are about to be evicted, which means this is no longer your marital residence." I snapped the document shut. "The moment your pen hit that paper in the hospital room, the ownership of this house reverted to me. You are not a homeowner, Bryce. You are a trespasser. And in the state of Illinois, I have the right to remove trespassers from my property using reasonable force." Bryce stepped back. His face was a mask of shock. He shook his head. "No, that is not legal. No judge will uphold that." "It is already filed," I said. "My lawyer filed the reversion notice the second you left the hospital. It is done. You are standing in my living room. You are breathing my air. And I am tired of sharing it with you." Bryce looked around. He looked at Jasmine. She wasn't looking at him with love anymore. She was looking at him with disgust. She had heard him call her father a historical accident. She had heard him talk about diluting the bloodline. The spell was broken. I nodded to the front door. 2 men stepped in. They were not police. They were my private security detail, former military. They filled the doorway, blocking out the night. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't have to. Their size was the weapon. "Mr. Sterling is leaving," I said to them. "Escort him off the property. If he resists, you have my permission to assist him." The first guard, a man named Marcus who had a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. He moved with a silent, predatory grace. He picked up Bryce's suitcase with one hand. "Let's go, sir," Marcus said. His voice was like grinding gravel. Bryce looked at Marcus. Then he looked at me. The reality of his situation finally crashed down on him. He had no money. He had no house. He had no family. He was being stripped of everything he thought made him a man. "You cannot do this to me," Bryce screamed. He backed away, knocking into the wall. "I am Bryce Sterling. I have connections. I will ruin you." "You are a trespasser," I repeated. Goodbye, Bryce. Marcus grabbed Bryce by the arm. It wasn't a gentle hold. It was a grip meant to control. Bryce flailed, trying to pull away. "Get your hands off me," Bryce yelled. He looked at Jasmine. "Jasmine, tell them to stop." Jasmine turned her back on him. She walked over to the closet and pulled out Leo, holding him tight against her chest, covering his ears. Marcus and the other guard dragged Bryce toward the door. He dug his heels into the expensive hardwood floor, leaving scuff marks. He was kicking and screaming like a child having a tantrum. "This isn't over, Russell," he howled as they shoved him through the doorway. "Do you hear me? This isn't over. You think you won. You think you can just erase me." I walked to the door. I watched as they dragged him down the driveway toward the street. The rain was falling harder now. He was getting soaked. His expensive suit was ruined. "You took everything," Bryce screamed from the sidewalk. "You took my life. You took my dignity. But you forgot one thing, old man." He stopped struggling for a second. He looked back at the house. His wet hair was plastered to his forehead. His eyes were wide and manic, glowing in the streetlights. "I know where you live," he shouted, "and I know what matters to you. You think you can protect them. You cannot protect them from everything." The guards shoved him onto the public sidewalk and turned back to the gate. Bryce stood there in the rain, shivering, pointing a finger at the house. "You will pay for this," he screamed. "I will make you beg me to stop." I closed the heavy oak door. The sound of his voice was cut off, replaced by the silence of the house. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the security chain. I turned around. Jasmine was sitting on the stairs holding Leo. They were both shaking. I walked over and sat down next to them. I put my arm around my daughter. "It is over," she whispered. I looked at the door. I could still feel the hatred radiating from the street. I remembered the look in Bryce's eyes. It wasn't the look of a defeated man. It was the look of a cornered rat that had decided to bite. "No," I said softly, more to myself than to her. "It is not over. Not yet." I felt a cold chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty hallway. I had stripped Bryce of his assets, but I had left him with his rage. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous enemy of all. I pulled my phone out and sent a text to Marcus. "Stay outside, all night. Do not take your eyes off the street." I had won the battle for the house. But as I looked at my grandson's fearful eyes, I realized the war for his safety had just begun. And the enemy was no longer inside the gates. He was out in the dark, waiting. The morning sun that filtered through the kitchen blinds felt like a lie. It was too bright and too cheerful for a house that had just witnessed a war. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the streets wet and shining. But the atmosphere inside my home was still heavy with the static of unresolved danger. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. My eyes were fixed on the security monitors I had set up on the counter. Marcus, my head of security, was still parked outside the gate in his black SUV. He hadn't moved all night. Every time a car slowed down on the street, I saw Marcus's brake lights flare. We were under siege, even if the enemy had retreated. Jasmine was at the stove making pancakes. She was moving mechanically, flipping the batter not because she was hungry, but because she needed to do something with her hands. She needed to be a mother. She needed to pretend that her husband hadn't just been dragged off the property, screaming threats of vengeance. Leo was sitting at the table across from me, coloring in a book. He was quiet, too quiet for a 5-year-old. He kept looking at the front door, waiting for the shouting to start again. "Eat your breakfast, Leo," Jasmine said softly. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. "I am not hungry, Mom," Leo said. He put down his crayon. "Is Dad coming back?" Jasmine froze. She looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "No, Leo," I said. "Your dad he is taking a time out. Like when you misbehave and have to sit in the corner. He needs to think about how to be nice." Leo nodded, accepting the logic of a child. "Okay, can I take my watch to school?" He held up his wrist. It was a bulky, digital watch with a rubber strap. I had given it to him for his birthday the year before. He loved it because it looked like the communication devices the Space Rangers wore in his favorite cartoon. "Sure, sport," I said. "Just don't play games during math class." Jasmine dropped him off at St. Jude's at 8:30. I watched on the GPS tracker on my phone until I saw the dot settle safely within the school perimeter. I breathed a sigh of relief. The school had strict instructions, armed security, a banned list with Bryce's face on it. I thought he was safe. I thought Bryce was probably passed out in a cheap motel room, nursing a hangover and a bruised ego. I was wrong. I underestimated the desperation of a narcissist who has lost his audience. At 10 o'clock, the phone rang. It wasn't the school. It was Jasmine. "Dad," she screamed. The sound tore through my eardrum. "Dad, he has him." "Who?" I asked, standing up so fast my chair fell over. "Bryce," she sobbed. "The school just called. There was a fire drill. Chaos. The teachers were herding the kids to the parking lot. Bryce. He was waiting by the fence. He cut the lock. He grabbed Leo and shoved him into a car. A rental car. Dad, he took him." I felt a cold sensation wash over my body. It started at the base of my neck and spread to my fingertips. It wasn't panic. Panic is hot and messy. This was ice. This was the combat mode I had lived in for 40 years in the shipping business. "Where are you?" I asked. "I am at the school," she cried. "The police are here. They are asking questions. They are talking about waiting periods and custody disputes. They don't understand. He is dangerous." "Stay there," I commanded. "Do not leave the police." I hung up. Before I could dial Marcus, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I answered. I didn't say hello. I just listened. "I told you," Bryce's voice hissed. It sounded ragged, broken, like he had been screaming for hours. "I told you I know what matters to you." "Where is he, Bryce?" I said. My voice was a flat line. "He is right here," Bryce said. "Say hi to Grandpa, Leo." "Grandpa!" Leo's voice was high and terrified. "Grandpa, I want to go home." "Shut up," Bryce snapped. There was a sound of a struggle, then the phone fumbled. "Listen to me, old man. You took my house. You took my money. You took my reputation. Now I have taken your heart." "What do you want?" I asked. $5 million, Bryce said. "Wire transfer to an offshore account. I will text you the details. And a plane. A private charter waiting at O'Hare. You have 3 hours." "I don't have that kind of cash liquid, Bryce," I said. "I need time." "You don't have time," he screamed. "You have 3 hours. If I don't see the confirmation by 1 o'clock, I am driving this car off a bridge. I swear to God, Russell, if I cannot have him, nobody can." He hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. Driving off a bridge. He meant it. He wasn't looking for a getaway. He was looking for a grand finale. He wanted to destroy me so badly, he was willing to destroy himself and his own son to do it. I looked at the clock. 10:05. 3 hours. The police would set up roadblocks, but Chicago is a city of 1,000,000 alleyways and side streets. By the time they found the car, it would be too late. Bryce knew that. He was counting on the bureaucracy to slow them down, but he wasn't counting on me. I walked into my study and locked the door. I didn't call the bank. I walked to the heavy steel safe in the corner and spun the dial. Inside, next to my deeds and my will, was a rugged, thick laptop. It was an old Panasonic Toughbook, the kind used by the military and heavy industry. I powered it up. The operating system was outdated, but the software running on it was proprietary. It was a custom logistics program I had built for Hayes Logistics back in the late 90s. You see, when you run a trucking empire, you learn one thing very quickly. Drivers lie. Cargo disappears. Hijackers exist. In 1998, after I lost a shipment of electronics worth $2 million to a coordinated heist, I stopped trusting standard GPS. I hired a team of ex-military engineers to build me a ghost system. We installed hardwired trackers in every trailer, hidden deep in the chassis, powered by kinetic energy and backup lithium cells. They operated on a low-frequency band used by ham radios and maritime navigation, not the standard cellular towers that everyone else used. When I retired, I sold the trucks, but I kept the technology, and I installed a miniaturized version of that tracker into one specific item, Leo's watch. It wasn't just a toy. It wasn't just a digital timepiece. It was a beacon. I had told Jasmine it was for safety, in case he got lost at the mall. She thought it was just an Apple AirTag or something similar that relied on nearby iPhones to ping a location. She didn't know the truth. An AirTag stops working if you go into a dead zone. An AirTag alerts the kidnapper's phone that it is being tracked. My system did neither. It was a silent, one-way scream on a frequency that Bryce Sterling didn't even know existed. I typed in my password. The screen flickered green. A map of Illinois loaded. It was a topographical map, overlaying the street grid. I initiated the search command. Target Alpha 1. The system whirred. It was triangulating signals from 3 different radio towers in the greater Chicago area. It took 30 seconds. The longest 30 seconds of my life. I stared at the blinking cursor, remembering the nights I sat in my dispatch office, tracking a stolen rig across state lines, guiding the state troopers mile by mile until they boxed it in. I remembered the adrenaline. I remembered the satisfaction of catching a thief. But this wasn't a trailer full of televisions. This was my blood. A red dot appeared on the screen. It was moving fast, westbound on I-290. He was heading out of the city. He wasn't going to O'Hare. He was lying about the plane. He was heading toward the industrial wastelands, the old quarries and the rusted bridges over the Des Plaines River. I zoomed in. He was doing 80 miles an hour. I grabbed the laptop. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the burner phone I kept in the safe. I ran out to the driveway. Marcus saw me coming. He stepped out of his SUV. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "where are you going? The police said to stay put." "Get in the truck, Marcus," I said, throwing my bag into the passenger seat of my Ford F-150. "Sir," Marcus said, looking confused. "We need to wait for the negotiator." "There is no negotiation," I said, starting the engine. The V8 roared to life, a sound that felt like a war cry. "He is not asking for money, Marcus. He is asking for an audience for his suicide. And I am the only one who can stop the show." Marcus looked at my face. He saw the look. It was the same look I had the night I fired an entire warehouse crew for stealing. It was the look of a man who was done playing by the rules of polite society. Marcus didn't argue. He jumped into the passenger seat. I punched the gas. The truck tires spun on the wet asphalt, smoking before finding traction. We shot out of the gate, fishtailing onto the street. "Pull up the map," I shouted at Marcus, pointing to the laptop. "Tell me where he is." Marcus opened the laptop. He saw the red dot. He looked at me with wide eyes. "He is taking the exit for the old cement factory," Marcus said. I knew that factory. It was abandoned 10 years ago. It sat on a cliff overlooking the deepest part of the quarry, which was now filled with black, stagnant water. It was a place where people went to disappear. "Hang on," I said, gripping the wheel. I didn't drive like a grandfather taking his truck to the grocery store. I drove like Russell Hayes, the man who used to haul illegal overtime loads through blizzards in the Rockies to make payroll. I drove with precision and fury. I wove through traffic, mounting the curb to bypass a red light, ignoring the honking horns. "I am coming, Leo," I whispered to the windshield. "Grandpa is coming." Bryce wanted a tragic ending. He wanted to drive off a bridge and leave me with a lifetime of guilt. He wanted to win. But he forgot that he was playing against a man who had spent 40 years navigating the most dangerous roads in America. He thought he was the driver of this story. He was about to find out he was just roadkill. The tires of my Ford F-150 tore through the mud and gravel of the access road leading to the old cement factory. The truck bounced violently, the suspension groaning under the abuse, but I did not lift my foot off the gas pedal. Beside me, Marcus was holding on to the grab handle with white knuckles, his eyes scanning the horizon. We were driving into a wasteland. This part of the quarry had been abandoned for a decade. It was a landscape of rusted iron, crumbling concrete pillars, and silence. To the left, the ground dropped away into a sheer cliff, at the bottom of which lay the stagnant black water of the quarry pit. It was a place where people went to hide things they never wanted found. "There," Marcus shouted, pointing through the rain-streaked windshield. I saw it. A silver sedan was parked dangerously close to the precipice. The front bumper was hanging over the edge of the drop. The engine was running, the exhaust puffing white smoke into the cold air. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded sideways, spraying gravel, coming to a halt 50 yards from the sedan. "Stay here," I ordered Marcus. "Call the police. Tell them we have him pinned, but do not engage unless I go down." I didn't wait for an answer. I kicked the door open and stepped out into the freezing drizzle. The wind up here was vicious. It whipped my coat around my legs and stung my eyes. I didn't feel the cold. My blood was boiling with a heat that could have melted steel. I walked toward the sedan. My hands were empty, held out to my sides. I needed Bryce to see that I wasn't armed. I needed him to focus on me, not on the boy in the car. "Bryce!" I shouted. The wind tore the name from my lips, but he heard me. The driver's side door of the sedan opened. Bryce stepped out. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out by madness. His expensive suit was torn and muddy. His hair was plastered to his skull. His eyes were wide, rolling in their sockets, fueled by adrenaline and hysteria. In his right hand, he held a knife. It wasn't a combat knife. It was a long, serrated bread knife, probably grabbed from the kitchen in his haste. It looked ridiculous in his shaking hand, but it was sharp enough to kill. With his left hand, he dragged Leo out of the back seat. Leo was crying, his small legs stumbling on the uneven ground. Bryce pulled him tight against his chest, holding the knife dangerously close to the boy's jacket. "Stay back!" Bryce screamed. His voice cracked, high and thin like breaking glass. "Stay back or I will jump. I swear to God, Russell, I will take him with me." I stopped moving. I stood 20 feet away from him. I planted my feet firmly on the gravel, adopting a stance I hadn't used since a trucker named Big Mike tried to hijack my rig in a parking lot in Memphis in 1982. Knees bent slightly, center of gravity low, hands up, palms open, appearing submissive but ready to strike. "Let him go, Bryce," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and steady. It was the voice of a man who was in complete control of the chaos. "This is between you and me. The boy has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with him," Bryce yelled, inching closer to the edge. "You want him so bad? You think you can just take my family? You think you can erase me? Well, let's see how you handle this." He jerked Leo back. Leo let out a terrified wail that pierced my heart like a needle. "Grandpa!" I looked at Leo. I forced a smile onto my face. "It is okay, sport," I said. "Grandpa is here. Just be brave for one more minute." I took a slow step forward. "Don't!" Bryce shrieked, waving the knife. "Bryce, look at you," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "You are cold. You are tired. You are scared. You don't want to die. You just want to win." "I have already lost," Bryce spat. "You took the house. You took the money." "We can fix the money," I lied. I took another step. The distance was closing, 15 feet. "I can wire you the funds, Bryce. I can set you up in a new city. But you have to put the knife down. You have to let Leo walk to me." Bryce hesitated. For a split second, the greed in his eyes flickered, warring with the madness. He lowered the knife an inch. "You would do that?" he asked. "I would do anything for my family," I said. "And technically, you are still family." I took 2 more steps. 10 feet. I was within the kill zone. If he lunged now, I would have less than a second to react. Bryce looked at me, then at the knife, then at Leo. The wind howled around us. I saw his muscles tense. I saw the decision form in his brain before he even moved. He realized I was lying. He realized there was no money. He realized that the only way to hurt me was to destroy the one thing I loved. "Liar!" he screamed. He didn't jump. He charged. He shoved Leo to the ground, hard, and lunged at me with the knife. He was fast, fueled by the explosive power of desperation. He aimed for my chest, a clumsy, sweeping overhand stab that was meant to end it all. But Bryce had spent his life fighting with lawyers and balance sheets. I had spent my life fighting with tire irons and chains. I didn't back up. I stepped into the attack. As his arm came down, I raised my left forearm, blocking his wrist. The impact jarred my bone, but I didn't flinch. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand, clamping down with a grip strength built from 40 years of hauling crates. I twisted his arm outward, away from my body. Bryce screamed as the torque hit his shoulder joint. He tried to knee me in the stomach, but I was already moving. I stepped inside his guard, driving my right shoulder into his chest. It wasn't a push, it was a collision. The air rushed out of his lungs with a sickening whoosh. He stumbled back, but I didn't let go of his wrist. I maintained the lock. He swung his left fist at my face. It connected with my jaw, a glancing blow that tasted like blood. I ignored it. "Drop it," I growled. I applied pressure to his wrist, bending it backward against the joint. I heard the snap before he screamed. It was the sound of the radius bone giving way under the strain. Bryce shrieked, a sound of pure animal agony. His fingers spasmed involuntarily, and the bread knife fell from his hand, clattering onto the rocks. I released his wrist and grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined suit. I spun him around, slamming him face first onto the hood of his rental car. "Stay down," I roared. He tried to push up, thrashing like a caught fish. I didn't use my fists. I used my weight. I drove my forearm into the back of his neck, pinning his face against the cold metal. I grabbed his right arm, the broken one, and pulled it behind his back. He howled again, his legs kicking uselessly at the gravel. It was over. The physical fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Experience had triumphed over rage. I looked up. Leo was sitting in the mud a few yards away, staring at us with wide, shocked eyes. "Leo, come here," I said, my voice softening instantly, though I was still winded. He scrambled up and ran to me. I couldn't hug him with both arms because I was holding his father down, so I let him bury his face in my coat. I wrapped one arm around him, shielding his eyes from the sight of Bryce bleeding on the hood. "It is okay," I whispered into Leo's hair. "I got you." In the distance, the wail of sirens cut through the wind. Marcus must have made the call the second I stepped out. I saw blue and red lights flashing against the gray sky, snake winding their way up the access road. Bryce was sobbing now. It wasn't the crying of a repentant man. It was the crying of a child who had broken a toy and blamed the floor. "You broke my arm," he whimpered into the metal hood. "You crazy old man. You broke my arm. You are lucky I didn't break your neck," I whispered close to his ear. The police cruisers skidded to a halt in a semicircle around us. Doors flew open. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting commands. "Drop the weapon. Step away from the vehicle." I slowly raised my empty hand. I kept the other arm around Leo. "It is secured," I shouted back. "He is unarmed." Two officers rushed forward. One of them pulled me gently away from Bryce, while the other two pounced on him. They yanked Bryce off the hood. He screamed again as they cuffed his hands behind his back, jarring his broken wrist. They dragged him up. He looked pathetic. His face was smeared with grease and blood. His nose was bleeding. He looked at me, and then he looked at the police officers. "He attacked me," Bryce yelled, spitting blood. "Arrest him! That man attacked me. He kidnapped my son." The lead officer, a sergeant with a gray mustache, looked at Bryce, then at the knife on the ground, then at Leo clinging to my leg. He didn't say a word to Bryce. He just nodded to his partner. "Get him in the car," the sergeant said. They shoved Bryce toward the cruiser. As they pushed his head down to get him into the back seat, Bryce looked back at me one last time. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow realization. He wasn't going to a luxury hotel. He wasn't going to a board meeting. He was going to a cage. And he knew, deep down, that he had put himself there. "Russell!" he screamed as the door slammed shut. "Russell, tell them who I am." I watched the cruiser rock as he kicked the window from the inside. I looked down at Leo. He was trembling. I knelt down in the mud, ignoring the pain in my knees and the throbbing in my jaw. I took off my coat and wrapped it around his small shoulders. "Who is he, Grandpa?" Leo asked, looking at the police car. I wiped a smudge of dirt from his cheek. "He is just a man who forgot how to love, Leo," I said softly. I picked my grandson up in my arms. He felt heavy, solid, real. The adrenaline was fading, leaving my muscles shaking, but I didn't falter. I carried him back to my truck, stepping over the knife that lay rusting in the rain. Marcus opened the door for us. "Let's go home, Marcus," I said. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The police cars were still there, flashing their lights against the gloom of the cement factory. Bryce was in the back of one of them, screaming at a world that had finally stopped listening. I turned my eyes back to the road. The hardest part was over, but I knew the cleanup was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the police station hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to burrow right into my skull. I sat on a hard wooden bench in the detective bureau, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee. My hands were clean now. The mud and grease from the quarry washed away in the restroom sink, but I could still feel the phantom weight of the struggle. Leo was in the next room with a child psychologist and Jasmine. I could hear the murmur of their voices, soft and safe. That was all that mattered. But the war wasn't over. The battlefield had just shifted from a gravel pit to a legal arena. At 10:30 in the evening, the double doors of the precinct swung open. They didn't just open, they were pushed with the authority of people who owned the building. In walked Richard and Catherine Sterling, Bryce's parents. I had met them only 3 times in 5 years. At the wedding, where they looked at my family like we were the catering staff. At Leo's christening, where they complained about the church being too urban. and once at a Christmas dinner where they spent the entire meal talking about their summer home in the Hamptons. They looked exactly as I remembered, only older and angrier. Richard wore a cashmere overcoat, and the kind of expression usually reserved for stepping in something unpleasant. Catherine was draped in furs, her face pulled tight by surgery and disdain. Trailing behind them was a man carrying a leather briefcase. He had the sharp, predatory look of a lawyer who charged by the minute and didn't lose. They didn't look at me. They marched straight to the desk sergeant. "I am Richard Sterling," the father announced. His voice carried across the room. "You have my son in custody. I demand to see him immediately, and I want to speak to the captain. This entire arrest is a farce." The sergeant, a tired man who had seen it all, didn't look up from his paperwork. "Mr. Sterling, your son is being processed. You can wait over there." "We will not wait," the lawyer cut in, stepping forward. "I am representing Mr. Sterling. My client has been the victim of an assault and a custodial interference. We are filing a counter-complaint against the Mr. Russell Hayes. We are also arranging for immediate bail." I stood up. My knees popped. I walked slowly toward them. Richard turned. He saw me. His lip curled. "You," he said. The word was an accusation. "Hello, Richard," I said calmly. "Catherine." "You have done enough damage," Catherine hissed. She clutched her purse. "You ruin our son's reputation. You steal his home. And now you have him arrested because he wanted to take his own son for a drive. You are a vindictive, small man." "He held a knife to his son's chest, Catherine," I said. "That is a lie," the lawyer said smoothly. "He didn't even look at me. He looked at the air above my head. My client was defending himself against an aggressor. You chased him down. You threatened him. The knife was for self-defense. And as for the child, a father cannot kidnap his own son. That is a civil matter, not criminal." They were spinning it. They were going to use their money and their influence to turn a hostage situation into a messy domestic dispute. They would get Bryce out on bail by morning. They would paint me as the crazy, violent grandfather. Richard stepped closer to me. He lowered his voice. "Listen to me, Russell. You are out of your depth. We know the district attorney. We know the judge. You are going to drop these charges. You are going to apologize. And you are going to return the house. If you don't, we will bury you in litigation so deep you will never see the sun again. We will take everything. We will take the boy. We will prove you are unfit." I looked at Richard. I looked at the lawyer who was already tapping on his phone, probably drafting the lawsuit. They were so confident. They thought the world worked a certain way. They thought that truth was something you could mold if you had enough gold to hammer it into shape. I reached into the pocket of my jacket. "Are you threatening me?" Richard asked, stepping back. "No," I said. "I am educating you." I pulled out a small black USB drive. It was the backup of the evidence I had compiled. I also pulled out the folded copy of the Confession of Judgment. "Officer," I called out to the sergeant. The sergeant looked up. "Yeah?" "These people claim their son is innocent," I said. "They claim this is a misunderstanding. I would like to submit some supplementary evidence for the file." I walked over to the sergeant's desk. The lawyer tried to intercept me. "I object to any unverified submission," the lawyer barked. "Sit down," the sergeant said. He looked at me. "What is it?" I plugged the USB drive into the sergeant's computer monitor, which was facing outward. I tapped the screen. "First, the video," I said. The video from the hidden camera in Jasmine's living room began to play. It showed Bryce throwing the vase. It showed him screaming. It showed him threatening to kill me. It showed Leo cowering in the closet. The audio was crisp and clear. "That is out of context," the lawyer said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then the audio," I said. I clicked the next file. It was the recording from the night before, when Bryce was being dragged out of the house. The quality was perfect. His voice filled the police station. "You are just a historical accident. You don't belong in this neighborhood." Jasmine needed to dilute the bloodline. She needed someone with pedigree to wash away the stain. The room went dead silent. The officers stopped typing. A detective passing by with a coffee mug stopped and stared. Richard Sterling went pale. Catherine put a hand to her throat. They weren't shocked by the racism. They were shocked that it was recorded. They were shocked that their private beliefs, the things they whispered at their country club, We're being broadcast in a police station in downtown Chicago. And finally, I said, unfolding the paper, the motive. I slammed the confession of judgment onto the desk. Your son didn't take Leo for a drive, Richard. He took him for ransom, because he owes me $200,000 that he stole. And he signed this document admitting to it yesterday morning. The lawyer leaned in. He read the document. He saw the signature. He saw the admission of fraud. He saw the waiver of trial rights. He stood up straight and closed his briefcase. "What are you doing?" Richard asked the lawyer. "Fix this." "Mr. Sterling," the lawyer said, his voice cold and professional, "I cannot fix this. Your son signed a confession of judgment. He admitted to a felony fraud in writing. And that video, that establishes violent intent. If we go to a bail hearing, that video will be played. The press will get it." "The press," Catherine whispered. Her eyes widened in horror. "If that audio gets out, Richard," I said, leaning against the desk, "if the board of directors at your bank hears what your son thinks about people like me, people who make up 30% of your customer base, what happens to your stock price?" Richard looked at me. For the first time, he didn't see a truck driver. He saw a man who had just placed a bomb under the foundation of his life and was holding the detonator. He looked at the evidence. He looked at the lawyer who was shaking his head. Then he looked at the door leading to the holding cells where his son was waiting. Bryce was expecting them. He was expecting the cavalry. He was expecting Daddy to write a check and make the bad man go away. Richard buttoned his cashmere coat. He adjusted his scarf. His face was like stone. "We have a reputation to uphold," Richard said to Catherine. Catherine nodded. Her eyes were dry. She didn't look at the holding cells. She looked at her husband. "We cannot be associated with this," she said. "The scandal would be ruinous." Richard turned to the lawyer. "We are leaving." "But Mr. Sterling," the lawyer said, "your son, he needs representation." "Then let the court appoint him one," Richard said. He turned to the sergeant. "We have no involvement in this matter. We were not aware of our son's activities. We do not condone his behavior. Good night." They turned around. They didn't look at me. They walked out of the police station with the same arrogance they had walked in with, only now it was brittle. They were cutting off a limb to save the body. They were abandoning their own flesh and blood because he had committed the one sin they could not forgive. He had been caught. I watched the doors swing shut behind them. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. I hated Bryce. I hated what he did. But watching his parents walk away, leaving him to rot because he was bad for their image, it explained everything. Bryce was a monster, yes, but he was a monster manufactured by those two people. He never stood a chance. He had been raised to value image over substance, money over loyalty, and pride over love. And when he finally needed them, really needed them, they treated him like a bad investment. They liquidated him. The lawyer looked at me. He looked at the sergeant. He shrugged, picked up his briefcase, and followed them out. He wasn't going to work pro bono. The sergeant looked at me. He shook his head. "Cold world," the sergeant muttered. "Yeah," I said. "Ice cold." I picked up my USB drive. I picked up the confession. "Can I see my daughter now?" I asked. The sergeant nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Hayes. You are a good man." I walked toward the family room. I didn't feel like a good man. I felt like a survivor. I had won the legal battle. Bryce was done. He would go to prison for a long time. His parents had disowned him. He had nothing. But as I opened the door and saw Leo sleeping on Jasmine's lap, I knew the real verdict wasn't delivered by a judge. It was delivered by the choices we make. Bryce chose money. I chose family. And in the end, the court of life always rules in favor of the one who shows up. I sat down next to them. Jasmine looked up. "Where are his parents?" she asked softly. "Gone," I said. "Gone? Where?" "Home," I said. "They decided they didn't want to be involved." Jasmine looked at me, then down at Leo. She understood. She pulled her son closer. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered. "Don't be," I said. I put my arm around both of them. "We are the lucky ones, Jasmine. We know who we are, and we know who we have." I closed my eyes. The station was noisy, but in that little room, it was quiet. We were safe, and tomorrow we would start rebuilding the world that Bryce Sterling had tried to break. The sound of a jail cell door sliding shut is not loud. It is final. It is a heavy mechanical clank that echoes in the marrow of your bones, signaling the end of one life and the beginning of a nightmare. Bryce Sterling sat on the edge of a steel cot that was bolted to the concrete floor. The mattress was thin, smelling of industrial disinfectant, and the misery of 1,000 men who had sat there before him. For the first time in his life, Bryce was not wearing a suit. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, scratching against his skin like sandpaper. He stared at the graffiti scratched into the paint on the opposite wall. Names, dates, gang symbols. He tried to close his eyes and imagine he was back in his penthouse at the Meridian, lying on Egyptian cotton sheets, but the smell of the open toilet in the corner broke the illusion. The reality was cold and hard. He was inmate number 49205. He was no longer a venture capitalist. He was no longer a husband. He was no longer a father. Earlier that morning, he had used his one phone call. He didn't call a lawyer because the court-appointed defender had already told him the bad news. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, the audio, the signed confession. He was looking at 10 to 15 years for kidnapping, extortion, and grand larceny. So he called his mother. The phone rang 4 times, then it went to voicemail. "You have reached the Sterling residence. We are unavailable to take your call." He called his father's mobile, blocked. He called his office, disconnected. He sat there, holding the receiver, listening to the dial tone hum until the guard forced him to hang up. That was the moment the true weight of his poverty hit him. It wasn't just a lack of money. He had known poor people before, or at least people he considered poor. But even they had someone to call. Even they had a mother who would cry for them, a brother who would scrape together bail money. Bryce had nobody. His parents had liquidated him like a bad asset to protect their stock portfolio. His wife was gone, taken by the man he had underestimated. His son was safe, probably eating pancakes in a warm kitchen, beginning the slow process of forgetting his father's face. Bryce looked at his hands. They were shaking. These hands had held champagne flutes and signed 6-figure checks. Now they were empty. He realized with a terrifying clarity that without the money, without the name, without the suit, he was nothing. He was a hollow shell of a man who had spent his life building a monument to his own ego, only to find out the foundation was made of sand. He curled up on the cot, facing the wall, and for the first time since he was a child, he cried. But nobody was watching, and nobody cared. While Bryce was learning the meaning of absolute zero, I was taking Jasmine and Leo on a field trip. We didn't go to a park. We didn't go to a museum. I drove them downtown, into the heart of the Chicago Loop, where the buildings scrape the clouds and the wind whips through the canyons of steel and glass. We parked in the underground garage of a skyscraper known simply as One River North. It was a 50-story tower of blue glass that reflected the river below. It was modern, sleek, and intimidating. "Why are we here, Dad?" Jasmine asked. She looked tired. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she held her head higher than she had in years. The fear was gone. "I have one last thing to show you," I said. We took the elevator. I didn't press the button for the lobby. I pressed the button for the penthouse, the 45th floor. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. My ears popped. Jasmine held Leo's hand tight. She looked at the numbers climbing. 20, 30, 40. The doors slid open. We stepped out into a space that was breathtaking. It was an entire floor of empty, pristine office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city. You could see the lake stretching out to the horizon like a sheet of hammered silver. You could see the ant-like cars crawling on the highways. You could see the world. Jasmine walked to the window. She gasped. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Who works here?" "Nobody," I said. "Not yet." I walked to the center of the room. The sunlight flooded in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I took a set of keys from my pocket. They were heavy, brass keys, not the electronic fobs Bryce loved so much. "Do you remember when Bryce asked for my blessing to marry you?" I asked. Jasmine nodded, not turning away from the window. "He told you he was going to build an empire. He told you he needed a partner who understood ambition." I walked up beside her. "I didn't trust him," I said. "I knew he was slick. I knew he was hungry. But I also knew you loved him. And I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had the capacity to grow. I wanted to believe that if I gave him the right foundation, He could become the man you deserved. I swept my hand across the empty room. I bought this building in 1998, Jasmine. When the market crashed and everyone was selling, I was buying. I own it, free and clear. No mortgage, no banks, just me. Jasmine turned to look at me. Her mouth fell open. You own One River North. I nodded. I kept it quiet. I didn't want the attention. I wanted to keep living my simple life. But I was saving this floor, this specific floor. I looked at the empty space where a corner office would be. 5 years ago, on your wedding day, I had a gift prepared. It wasn't a toaster. It wasn't a check. It was a deed. A deed transferring ownership of this entire floor and the management rights of the building to a new company. A company I named J&B Holdings. Jasmine and Bryce. Jasmine covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes again. This was going to be his empire, I said softly. I was going to give him the keys. I was going to let him run it. All he had to do was treat you with respect. All he had to do was be a decent father and a loyal husband. He didn't need to be rich. He just needed to be good. I held up the keys. He spent 5 years chasing investors. He spent 5 years lying and cheating to get a seat at the table. He didn't realize that I had built the table for him. He was sitting on a winning lottery ticket, and he tore it up because he didn't like the font. Jasmine looked around the room. She saw the ghost of the life she could have had. She saw the office where Bryce could have worked. She saw the reception area where she could have greeted clients. It was a kingdom that had been waiting for a king who never showed up. He lost all of this, she whispered, because he wouldn't let you into a birthday party. No, I said. He lost this a long time ago. The party was just the moment I decided to stop waiting for him to change. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, in a concrete box, Bryce was realizing what he had thrown away. But I didn't feel pity. I felt relief, because if I had given him this building, he would have sold it. He would have leveraged it. He would have destroyed it, just like he tried to destroy us. Jasmine turned to me. She wiped her face. I feel so stupid, Dad. I thought he was the prize. I thought I was lucky that a man like him wanted a girl like me. I let him make me feel small because I thought his world was so big. I took her shoulders in my hands. I looked her in the eye. Listen to me, Jasmine, and listen good. This building is made of steel and glass. It is strong. It is impressive. But it is just a thing. It can be bought. It can be sold. It can fall down. I pointed to her chest. What you have inside you, your loyalty, your kindness, your love for that boy, that is the real estate. That is the asset that doesn't depreciate. Bryce didn't give you value, Jasmine. He was renting space in your heart that he couldn't afford. Jasmine looked at me. She took a deep breath. She looked at the keys in my hand. What are you going to do with it? She asked. The floor. I smiled. I put the keys in her hand. I am not giving it to Bryce, I said. And I am not giving it to you to manage. Not yet. You have healing to do. You have to find out who Jasmine is when she isn't trying to please a narcissist. I looked over at Leo, who was pressing his nose against the glass, looking at a helicopter flying by. But one day, I said, Leo is going to need a legacy, and he is going to need a mother who knows how to run it. So, consider this your classroom. You want to start a foundation? You want to start a business? It is yours, rent-free. Jasmine closed her fingers around the keys. She looked at the city. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a woman who was surveying her domain. Thank you, Dad, she said. Not for the building, but for waking me up. I put my arm around her. We stood there for a long time, 3 generations of haze, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a golden fire over the water. The storm was over. The night would come, but we weren't afraid of the dark anymore. We owned the light. Let's go get some pizza, Leo shouted from the window. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I had felt in weeks. Pizza sounds good, I said. And after that, we have a lot of work to do. We walked back to the elevator. The doors closed on the empty office, sealing away the potential of what could have been, and opening the door to what would be. Bryce Sterling was a footnote in our history, a painful lesson. But as we descended, I knew one thing for sure. The rise of Jasmine Hayes had just begun. 6 months have passed since the doors of the police cruiser slammed shut on Bryce Sterling. 6 months is not a long time in the history of a city like Chicago, But in the life of the Hayes family, it has been an entire era. The winter ice has melted, washing away the gray slush and the bitter memories of that cold afternoon at the cement factory. Spring has arrived, and with it, a warmth that has nothing to do with the weather. I am sitting in the corner office of the 45th floor of One River North. I am not sitting behind the desk. That seat is taken. Jasmine is sitting there. She is on a conference call with the director of a women's shelter, discussing a grant from the new Hayes Foundation. She looks different. The first thing she did after the divorce was finalized was cut her hair. Bryce had always insisted she keep it long and dyed a soft blonde because he thought it looked aristocratic. Now, she wears it in a sharp, dark bob that frames her face. She looks like her mother Etta. She wears a tailored blazer, not the pastel dresses Bryce used to pick out for her. She speaks with a voice that doesn't quaver. It is a voice that commands attention, not because it is loud, but because it is sure. I watch her work. She is not just managing the building. She is turning it into a fortress for others who have been broken. She has dedicated a wing of the floor to providing legal and financial aid to victims of domestic financial abuse. She is using her scars as a map to help others find their way out of the woods. She is no longer the victim. She is the lighthouse. And then there is Leo. He is down in the lobby with Marcus, who has transitioned from being a security guard to being the world's most overqualified soccer coach. I watch them on the monitor. Leo is laughing. He is kicking a ball against the marble wall, and for the first time in his life, nobody is yelling at him to stop making noise. He doesn't ask about his father anymore. The child psychologist said that kids are resilient, that they heal when they feel safe, and Leo feels safe. He knows that when he goes to sleep, the monsters aren't in the hallway. The monsters are gone. I sip my coffee. It is black and strong. I don't come here to run things. I come here to read the newspaper and watch my daughter fly. I spent 40 years building a trucking empire so I could leave a legacy. I thought the legacy was the money. I was wrong. The legacy is her. The weekend arrives with a blue sky that looks like it was painted by a master artist. It is Leo's 6th birthday. We are not at LeBlanc. We are not at a French restaurant where the menu is in a language we don't speak and the portions are small enough to inhale. We are in my backyard. The grass is freshly cut, smelling of green life and gasoline. The smoke from my charcoal grill is drifting through the neighborhood, carrying the scent of ribs and homemade barbecue sauce. It is a simple party. There is a bouncy castle that costs $200 to rent. There are coolers filled with soda and juice. The guests are not investors or hedge fund managers. They are Leo's friends from his new school. They are Jasmine's staff from the foundation. They are my old trucking buddies, men with calloused hands and loud laughs, who treat Leo like a prince. Jasmine is wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She is barefoot in the grass, chasing Leo, her laughter ringing out clear and true. It is a sound I haven't heard in 5 years. It is the sound of freedom. We ordered catering for the sides: potato salad, coleslaw, corn on the cob. A delivery van pulls up to the gate. I walk over to meet it. The driver steps out, struggling with 2 large thermal bags. She is wearing a polo shirt with a catering company logo. She looks tired. She looks familiar. I open the gate. She looks up. Her eyes widen. She freezes. It is the hostess, the woman from LeBlanc, the one who looked at my boots and told me I wasn't on the list, the one who smirked when she threatened to call security. She doesn't smirk now. She looks terrified. She looks at the house. She looks at me. She recognizes the man she turned away. "Mr. Hayes," she stammers. I didn't know this was your address." I look at her. I see the name tag on her shirt. Jennifer. I see the fatigue in her eyes. I heard through the grapevine that LeBlanc had fired a lot of staff after the scandal with Bryce. The restaurant took a hit when the story broke that they were enabling a fraudster. "Hello, Jennifer," I say. She sets the bags down. Her hands are shaking. "I am just dropping off the order. I can leave it here. I don't want to cause any trouble." She thinks I am going to yell. She thinks I am going to get revenge for that night. She thinks I am Bryce. I pick up the bags. They are heavy. "Bring the rest," I say gently. "The table is in the back." She follows me, walking hesitantly. We set the food down on the picnic table. She starts to unpack the trays, keeping her head down, avoiding eye contact with the guests. She wants to disappear. I reach into my pocket. I pull out my wallet. I take out 2 crisp $100 bills. "Jennifer," I say. She looks up, bracing herself. I hold out the money. "Thank you for the delivery," I say. "And thank you for doing your job that night." She blinks. She looks at the money, then at me. "What?" "You were following orders," I say. "You were protecting a list. You didn't know the list was flawed. But you taught me something important. You taught me that I needed to stop waiting to be invited and start building my own door." She takes the money. Her eyes fill with tears. She has probably been working double shifts to make ends meet. She has probably been dreading running into someone from her old life. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," she whispers. "I am sorry about that night." "Don't be," I say. "That night is history. Enjoy the barbecue if you want to grab a plate." She shakes her head, smiling weakly. "I have more deliveries, but happy birthday to your grandson." She walks away. She walks a little lighter. I watch her go. I don't feel anger. I don't feel the need to rub her nose in my success. That is what a small man would do, and I am done with small men. I turn back to the party. Leo is blowing out the candles on a cake that Jasmine made. It is chocolate, messy, and lopsided. It is the most beautiful cake I have ever seen. I walk over to my lawn chair, the one positioned under the old oak tree. I sit down. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. I take a sip of iced tea. I watch my family. They are safe. They are whole. People ask me how I did it. How I went from a retired trucker to the man who brought down a financial predator. They ask if I miss the money I spent on legal fees, on the building, on the payoffs. I tell them that money is just fuel. It sits in the tank and does nothing until you burn it to get somewhere. I burned a lot of fuel to get us here, but we arrived. I look at my hands. They are old hands. They have steered 18-wheelers through blizzards. They have changed diapers. They have held a dying wife's hand, and they have taken down a villain. They are tired hands, but they are steady. I think about Bryce. He is sitting in a cell, blaming the world for his fate. He will never understand. He thought power came from exclusion. He thought power was keeping people off the list. He didn't know that real power is having the strength to protect the people on your list, no matter what it costs. Jasmine walks over to me. She hands me a paper plate with a slice of cake. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" she asks. I smile at her. "I am thinking that I finally delivered the load, baby girl," I say. She kisses my cheek. "You sure did, Dad. You sure did." I take a bite of the cake. It is sweet. Life is sweet. I am Russell Hayes. I am a father. I am a grandfather. And I am the man who rewrote the guest list. If you enjoyed this story, if you felt the anger and the relief, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to remind someone of your worth? Where are you listening from tonight? I read every single comment. This is Russell Hayes, signing off. Keep your eyes on the road and hold your family tight. I will see you in the next story. This experience taught me that true wealth is never found in a bank account, and it certainly isn't worn on a wrist. It is found in the quiet strength of character, in the courage to protect the innocent, and in the dignity of knowing your own worth. Bryce made the fatal mistake of confusing my silence with weakness, but he learned that the most dangerous man in the room is often the one who listens the most. Family is not defined by blood, but by behavior. Never let anyone, no matter who they are, treat you like an option in your own life. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Have you ever had to stand up to a toxic family member? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time.